Chapter 1480. 100 million years. The beginning of a 9-digit year was a long period of time. Although he wanted to use some method to record that long and difficult time, he realized that there was nothing worth mentioning after careful consideration. 100 million years passed in the blink of an eye to the void, and compared to an era, it was still missing another 100 million. 100 million years, a 9-digit year, was a time of great changes for some worlds. The world might have gone through several changes, evolving from the most primitive era where people carried stones and wrapped leaves to an era where everyone could fly, traverse the stars, go up to the sky, and down to the ground. After that, everything would return to the starting point and start all over again, often repeating the cycle several times. There might also be some things that never changed, with the world of order repeating chaos and peace as usual. The new generation would inherit the old generation, treading on the old generation's path and moving forward, while the living would take the place of the dead, allowing everything to move forward as normal. That was the case for the world of order and the void. Swaying and swaying, a long period of time would unknowingly disappear. Long and lonely? It would be great if it was really lonely. That was the least lonely 100 million years he had experienced. Every day, he would wield the nether void sword and carry billions of formations to sweep across the void. Parting with life and death was just a slightly special cycle among the many cycles. Many had come and gone from this place, but the only thing that did not change was their firm determination to guard the edge of order. The heavily wounded follow the lightly wounded and retreat into the void sealing circle. Seize the time to recover. Warriors of the divine realm, heed my orders. Activate energy towers and energy barriers and begin clearing the battlefield. The echelons at the back fill in the gaps in the energy barriers. Do not attempt to cross that boundary, or you will be blasted into a piece of charcoal by your own people. People were replaced, energy rumbled, and vast galaxies of energy raged through the void. In front of them, there was also an energy that seemed capable of destroying worlds again and again. They went back and forth, constantly fighting, constantly waving the weapons in their hands, releasing the enormous energy in their bodies, blocking the invasion of the enemies from the chaotic world. Numbness? Perhaps there were, but time had diluted their numbness. They could no longer remember when was the last time they rested, or when was the last time they pretended to be mortals to drink and eat. Those who could not adapt had long been eliminated. Those who were still standing on the battlefield were all ruthless people who could fight in the void for thousands of years without wavering. Yin Nuoshing and the others, they had never stopped from the beginning. None of the warriors of the divine realm had more than 2 hours to retreat. They stood at every corner of the void front line, forming a unique line of defense. Yin Nuoshing had stopped a few times, but that was at the very beginning. The first few times, it was because his body had not recovered, and he was knocked out by Jing Yuanji to heal his wounds. Other times, it was mostly because Siyu and Feng Qing Wang could not take it anymore. He had no choice but to bring them back. However, it only took him a few minutes to settle them down before he slipped away. There were 10,000 thoughts in his mind that told him to stop and accompany the two girls. 10,000 thoughts in exchange for 3 minutes of persistence. He left. The next time they met was still at the front line. It had only been a few days, and the two girls seemed to have become a lot stronger. Little star, the energy arrays are almost depleted. Do you want to stop and recharge? Or do you want to continue pouring energy? Siyu walked up from the side and looked at Yin Nuoshing. 2 5-color divine halos were spinning casually behind her. Continue attacking until the energy towers are overloaded. Tell Yuan Ji to prepare the next batch of energy towers and stuff the replacement towers into the void seal. Yin Nuoshing did not have to think much before he answered. He had said this many times before. The resources they had consumed over the years were probably enough to fill an empty world of light. Those resources were all converted by means of planar laws and other means, and were generated out of thin air. Just the energy towers in the realm of gods had been replaced one after another. The energy crystals were not used up much, but the energy towers as carriers could not hold on. Sometimes, They would simply hug an energy crystal and use it as an energy node to attack. Yin Nuashing turned his attention away slightly. He glanced at the slim girl beside him and was a little dazed. It was only when he noticed the two divine halos behind her that he came back to his senses. Yes, it had been 100 million years. Even Yu had ascended to rebirth. He felt a little emotional as he watched her skillfully assist him in commanding the energy arrays. Unknowingly, you have reached this level. Yu froze for a moment when she heard a voice that was different from usual. It was not an order, nor did it carry any other meaning. She turned her head when she noticed Yin Nuashing's gaze. After a moment, she smiled brightly. Unknowingly, I don't know how many years have passed. But, my Lord Observer, now is not the time to be distracted. Yin Nuashing smiled faintly and shook his head. He didn't say anything else. The two of them felt a little more relaxed after just one sentence. This was probably the only time they could relax during this period of time, if it didn't count the time when he was absent-minded. How is the situation? Yin Nuashing began to confirm the situation in various parts of the void. Qing Jun, report the situation. There are no accidents, Lord Feng. Lord Feng, everything is normal. Qing Jun and Qing's answers were also the same. This also meant that the situation in the void battlefront was not a big problem. There were a few accidents in the past 100 million years. The abyssal death fog suddenly condensed a huge force that impacted their entire void blockade. The powerful force that broke out for a moment made Yin Nuashing and the others have to choose to retreat. The blockade would also shrink as a result, retreating little by little towards the upper plane. However, their current location was still in the middle plane, and there was still a long distance from the upper plane. Buddy, everything is normal here. It has been a long time since the last large-scale impact of the abyssal death fog. Huey's voice began to sound after a minute. Thousands of years? I can't remember the specific time. Yin Nuashing breathed a long sigh of relief in his soul. It had been a long, very long time. So many years had passed, and so many things had happened during those years, constantly impacting his memory and soul. How could he still remember the things that were the turning point? Has the realm stabilized? You asked me this question 1,000 years ago. We could not help but smile bitterly. They had been highly focused on commanding the battle. They were the core of the battlefield, and the direction of the battle depended on their will. So they could not relax for a moment, and have been tense all the time. Even the energy life forms could not bear this level of concentration. Oh, is that so? I can't remember clearly. Then answer me again. Yin Nuashing was slightly stunned and could not help but shake his head. It's stabilized, but the road after the Yuansha realm is difficult to walk. It needs to be explored bit by bit. Although it's not good to talk about these things in the current situation, it's okay to be lazy. Just 1 minute and say a few words. Hui scratched his head and laughed. The road of the Yuansha realm is very different from all the realms we have experienced before. I haven't figured it out yet. I'll tell you when I have time. Yin Nuashing's cheeks twitched. She did not know when the one would be. They could not even tell when they would have time. Hui Lian had been entangled in the void front line. It took him many years to reach the Yuansha realm and stabilize himself bit by bit. It was not easy to reach this step. How could he have more time to study? The soul communication only took a very short amount of time. It had only been less than a minute since the conversation with Yu. Yin Nuashing once again focused his attention on this boundless dark void. Looking at the constant collision between the order and the death fog of the abyss, his expression once again calmed down. He used a calm tone to convey one order after another, commanding the power of the world of order. After arranging many things, Yin Nuashing breathed into his palm. After a while, he said to Jing Yuanji, Yuanji, I'll leave the command to you. Take care of Yu and Feng. I'm going out for a walk. Lord Feng, I wish you all the best. Yin Nuashing slowly walked out of the energy barrier. That tiny figure attracted everyone's attention in an instant. The life forms of the world of order all turned their attention to him. They watched him walk out step by step. His body was surging with a dazzling white light. Waves of energy surged out from his body like waves. The attacks that were launched from the energy barrier were all swept into the dazzling white energy storm. The power was strengthened by dozens of times and poured into the direction of the abyss of death mist along with the storm. Nihility, origin order. With a murmur, a shockwave that was powerful enough to overturn the void rushed to every corner of the void. The abyss of death mist and the manifestations that were close to it were all sent tumbling. His power had also increased a lot after that. However, he still couldn't touch that layer of barrier. It was as if he was rejected by the primeval realm. He was like a drowning person struggling in the middle of the sea. There was no shore in sight. He was lonely and helpless. Forget it. He didn't feel lonely or helpless. He was still the most powerful attack in the world of order. He was much more powerful than the last time when the world of gods was attacked. It was just that he was a little regretful that he couldn't kick open that door. In the middle and late stages of the 51st era of the primeval realm, the long war was still evolving little by little. The battle in the void was still chaotic and never-ending. In the world of gods, it had also been 100 million years since the departure of the gods. It was difficult for the things that happened in the depths of the void to spread to the world of gods. In the beginning, there was indeed a lot of panic. However, when the creation's barrier was restored in time, many people stuffed their hearts back into their chests to prevent their hearts from jumping up and down. To them, as long as they could see the creation's barrier, they would feel that the two great masters had not left and were still protecting the world of gods. The transparent barrier that covered the sky seemed to be an extension of the two great masters' myth. However, the collective disappearance of the gods in the world of gods was still a topic of discussion in the world of practitioners. First, a group of people who stood at the top of the pyramid left together. Then, almost 90% of the rebirth state experts disappeared. Just like the time more than 100 million years ago, the experts of the world of gods turned out in full force. This time, they left even more cleanly. There was almost no one left who knew about it. The only thing that the disciples of the major forces and families could confirm was that their ancestors, divine ancestors, and primogenitors were still alive and well. However, they did not know where they had gone. Even if there was a conflict between the major forces, there was no way to call them back. It was as if they had collectively given up on the world of gods. These things had always been given the title of mystery and did not evolve into a ghost story. Those who still had the time to think about it mostly classified it as a continuation of the previous incident. Although they themselves did not know what had happened back then, this did not stop them from talking about these things clearly and logically. There were many who followed behind to help fill in the holes, but there were also many who were there to tear down the stage, bicker, and spread rumors. The people of each faction had their own opinions, and sometimes they would even fight over a small point of view, as if they were the people who had been there to witness everything back then. The funniest thing was that these so-called insiders all came out of their mothers' wombs in the recent tens of millions of years. That's right, they had nothing to do with the things that happened more than 100 million years ago. Then, they gathered in various places and talked about it with great eloquence. Every word they said could arouse the emotions of the listeners. Some observant people had even compiled a small booklet of the various sayings of these big sects. The Pantheon had left the Pantheon in search of a new world. They were opening up a new world in another world and were still working hard. Once they were done, they would bring their people and leave the Pantheon for a better world to live in. This was the version that had the most supporters and supporters. However, the Pantheon was the #1 major world. There was no such thing as a better world. It could only be said that the new generation had nothing better to do. There were many things that they did not understand. The gods went to seek revenge for the great war that happened in the divine realm some years ago. They fought a long and eternal war in the void until the enemies who attacked the divine realm were completely annihilated. This was the most popular version among the people. It was said that there was indeed a little bit of similarity. They probably heard part of it from those who witnessed the war back then and combined it with their own processing. However, Long Sky and the other distorted race fellows had all died in that war. Now, they were being dragged out to whip their corpses. It was really tragic. There were also some who said that the gods had gone to solve the problem of the void, overcrowding, to purge those who were causing trouble in the void, to go to the lower primordial realm, and so on. These were all versions of the story that only a few people agreed with. Anyway, there were a lot of people who said these things, and everyone who said these things had completely turned into the crowd who was present at the scene of the war. They also said that they were something at the scene. They cried and danced with joy. It was so convincing that they almost believed it, if not for the fact that they did not keep their expression straight. Although I have no idea where you got the missing information from and came up with these flimsy stories and legends, the matter itself is not that complicated. They just went out together for something and still can't solve it. They can't come back. The second version is a little similar, but they did not go for revenge. In a huge restaurant, a slim and graceful young girl in a yellow dress couldn't help but speak up when she heard the words "I know" and "I know." The effect was immediate. The entire restaurant was in an uproar. Some people threw dozens of questions at the girl, but more people began to seize the words in the new version of the story that she said, using her words to prove their own. Many of them inverted black and white, giving irrelevant answers and speaking on different channels. In the end, the quarrel escalated from a quarrel to a brawl. The entire restaurant instantly turned into a training ground. A large group of people from all over the world caused a ruckus in other people's restaurants. It was not until they were all thrown out by the owner of the restaurant that the world suddenly quieted down. What a bunch of weird people. Humans are really weird. What's there to argue about? If you really want to know the so-called truth, you just have to go to the void and you'll find out. Yuan Kong had not left the table since the chaotic brawl behind him. He was still leisurely eating his food and drinking his tea. As he ate, he suddenly put down his chopsticks and could not help but sigh. Initially, he came out to find something fun to do and, at the same time, get involved in the affairs of the mortal world. He did not expect that he would not be able to escape from the whirlpool of events. Even the realm of the gods was in such a mess. The entire realm of order was probably in an uproar because of this matter. "Boss, I'll leave the money here." Yuan Kong let out a long sigh and got up to leave the restaurant. When he walked out the door, he saw a bunch of people lying on the street in front of him. They were all the people who were talking about the commotion in the restaurant. Even if they were lying there, they would still say things like, "I'm the one who's right," or "You're bullshitting." They were really persistent. This year was the 100 millionth year. Yuan Kong had been in the realm of the gods for a little more than 100 million years. After Yin Nuoxing and her sister left, she became the second observer, observing and learning everything about the realm of the gods. Although she was left at home most of the time, she was still very clear about the things that happened in the depths of the void. Every once in a while, she would be able to contact her sister directly. She would also be able to exchange a few words with that not-so-annoying fellow. The cycle repeated day after day. The flow of time has changed, and a new generation has appeared in the deity realm. While the deities were away on their expeditions, many more rebirth realm beings have appeared, and the new generation is also growing strong. What an inconceivable world! Yuan Kong was casually strolling on the streets, following the river in the mountainous region of the city into the distance. For other worlds, losing 90% of their peak forces would probably cause chaos. However, because of the existence of two divine roles, the realm of the gods has always remained peaceful. However, the stories of the older generation still continued in the realm of the gods. Just like what she had heard and seen during this period of time, there were all kinds of stories. If it weren't for the fact that this group of people was purely guessing and deducing why the gods left, Yuan Kong would have thought that they were afraid that the realm of order wasn't chaotic enough and wanted to add 2 more flames to the realm of the gods. In the past 100 million years, there were no outsiders. Those who originally stayed in the realm of the gods were still there, either as tourists or simply settled down. Divine Shadow City was still Divine Shadow City, but after the initial bustle, it was now a little quieter. It was not hard to understand. According to that not-so-annoying fellow, 60 to 70% of the forces in the realm of order were gathered at the front lines of the void. Those who came to other worlds to cause trouble or visit back then were probably now fighting at the front lines. Peaceful, it's really peaceful, Yuan Kong muttered to himself as he stood by the riverside. The realm of the gods was currently so peaceful that there was nothing that could be considered a disturbance. Battles big and small were either due to the concept of race, territory, or simply because you didn't like the look of me and I glanced at you. There was nothing new or meaningful about it. Although there were new lives being born and dying in this world at every moment, she still felt a trace of boredom and boredom. Those who lived in peace thought that the waves in the bathtub were the storms they experienced, but they did not realize that outside the bathtub was a boundless ocean. The storms and undercurrents that could come at any time could swallow them up. She did not know if they would notice that the person who helped them hold up the peaceful domain at the edge of their lives was fighting for this world, risking everything, and could not even come back. Yuan Kong sighed deeply and looked down at her hands. She suddenly felt that it was about time. She mustered the courage to touch the seed in her soul that she had never touched before. Clenching her little hands, her red lips trembled, and she spoke softly. "Big idiot, I miss you and my sister. Let me go help." Chapter 1481. Time was a very mysterious factor. It gave all things in the world a unit of measurement that was on the same parallel line. The beings living in the void always liked to use time to remember things that would disappear easily or things that would disappear in a flash. Just like the void at this moment, 100 million years had passed without them noticing. It was a long and endless time. She had also crossed 100 million years of time, going back and forth in the Yuan realm, constantly searching. The territory of order has shrunk by another 1%. The little girl stood on a barren and lonely planet, surrounded by chaos and emptiness. Nothing existed. She breathed into her palm and stared at the void for a long time. She could not help but shake her head and mumble to herself, "I wonder how they are doing." Even with their help in the past 100 million years, the power of order is still slowly weakening. I'm afraid the situation at the front lines is not much better. She and the others who were running at the front lines of the void and the rules probably did not have a good time in the past 100 million years. Yin Nuashing and the others were guarding the front lines of the void and did not have much time to breathe. She, on the other hand, had been wandering around the Yuan realm for 100 million years. She had visited all 8 primordial realms before returning to the 8 primordial realms. For the time being, I've greeted the guardians of the other primordial realms' cores. Let's hope nothing happened to them. The little girl rubbed her little hands. She thought that she was the only altar that had a guardian consciousness. She did not expect the other primordial realms to have one as well. However, unlike her, they could not run around as they pleased. They needed to guard the world of the altar and could not even transform. She was a unique example. She went to confirm that the primordial realms cores of the other primordial realms were all fine. It seemed that only the 8 primordial realms core had run away on its own. They were monitoring some special big movements in the void. They did not see the 8 primordial realms core and only found traces left behind by it. They followed these traces and searched, running around in the void. After 100 million years, they finally returned to the 8 primordial realms. She looked at the void in the distance, and a faint light appeared on her body. She lifted her feet and walked into the distance. The void of order had become a lot more oppressive. The shock waves from the collision between the energies of order and chaos spread out from the front line of the void. The energy shock waves that contained a large amount of complex laws couldn't be easily broken down by the void. They drifted along with the flow and drifted about. Even in the void of order, this kind of aura could be felt. It made people feel uncomfortable, as if even the void had some undetectable changes because of this. The current void environment has a low level of order, and the balance is slightly skewed. Order energy is in a highly active state, but it can't resist the invasion of chaotic energy. A large amount of meaningless consumption of order energy and the laws of order have produced a considerable amount of waste products. They have accumulated in the depths of a void to form new sins of order. The lower and middle planes are the core of a large amount of accumulation. The sins of order that won't dissipate and can't be released will destroy the foundation of the void. However, it hasn't reached that level yet. The little girl couldn't help but frown as she inspected the middle and lower planes. That place was also quite dangerous for her. The endless abyssal death shroud piled up in those places. She wanted to go and have a look, but she might be caught by the abyssal death shroud as soon as she showed up. This time, they might not have the time to come and save her. However, if the sins of order they're not dealt with, it will have a huge impact on the void. The little girl sighed softly. She rubbed her hands in the direction she was walking and suddenly deviated in another direction. It seemed that she had to go and meet them. By the way, the new traces also pointed to the 8 Elements realm. She couldn't find it in the previous search. Perhaps it was because it was dark under the light. This time, she had to go to some places that she had already been to and search again. The front line of the void. Spring went and autumn came. No, there were no such romantic words in the void. There was only loneliness, desolation, and destruction in the void, especially in such a battlefield that was completely unsuitable for the survival of life. The only thing that could be seen was that the void was as lively as ever. In the endless battle between the power of order and the power of chaos, there was no so-called tomorrow. There was no so-called hope. They were not even allowed to have the time to think about hope. They had to stay here for a long time and let the memory of the battle be engraved in their bodies so that they would subconsciously swing their weapons when they see the enemy. That was the only thing they could do, and it was also the state that they would reach in the end. If there was a wish that they were allowed to have, it would be to live on. To live on today, to live on from the battlefield, to stand tall in the end. That was their only wish. Eternity, that was probably a concept that everyone would understand. Even if the word eternity was the norm for the heavenly gods like them, it was only at this moment that most of them truly understood the meaning of the word and the weight that it represented. The battle has entered a state of equilibrium. The abyssal death shroud's onslaught has been maintained for a total of 101,770 years. Recorded. Yin Nuashing stood at the forefront, his black starry robes stained with the blood of his own people and the energy of the abyssal death shroud. The vast and boundless tide had changed over the last few days, as if it had entered a different state. Now, their gradual retreat was proof of that. However, he knew very well that it was not because the abyssal death shroud was tired, but because they needed some time to properly digest the 1% of order territory that they had gained over 100 million years. The coming battle would only tire us even more and catch us off guard. Usually, the most tiring time is not during the white-hot phase of the battle, but during the period of equilibrium that follows. Yin Nuashing pressed both hands on the hilt of the nether void sword and breathed deeply. The period of equilibrium is upon us. The abyssal death shroud would use all means to attempt to breach the void defenses at a small cost. This time, they still have so many sentient individuals within. This period of equilibrium will be difficult. Yin Nuashing waited until the battlefield behind him was almost cleaned up and the wounded had all returned to the void sealing circle before he pulled out the nether void sword, turned around, and walked into the void sealing circle. Jing Yuanji, who was beside him, saw this and slowly retreated in the direction of the abyssal death mist, guarding against any sudden attacks from the enemy. No need to be nervous. Their sentient individuals have already left the battlefield, so there won't be any ambush that you're worried about. Yin Nuashing waved his hand and pulled Jing Yuanji back into the blockade. He looked at the situation on the wall and muttered to himself for a moment before saying softly, "Clean up and recover. Set up watchers on the wall and be alert for any attack from the abyssal death shroud at any moment. The watchers need to be in batches and soak in the energy of the purification runes for at least 2 hours every day to prevent the abyssal death shroud from invading. Now, time is hard to come by. Let's all get some rest." Scattered sounds could be heard on the wall as the wounded were carried down. Those who could still move and not die simply sat cross-legged on the wall, cultivating and recovering as they stared at the abyssal death shroud. The expression on their faces was as stiff as those who had been frozen in the northern ice realm for billions of years. The numbness and dullness had long been worn away by who knows how many years ago. At this moment, they would only follow the orders of their bodies, or the orders of Yin Nuoxing and the others. This was probably the after effect. Even if the battle really ended and peace was restored in the void one day, they would not recover so quickly. They would remain in this state for a long time, forever in the state they were in before they turned into killing machines. Yin Nuoxing suppressed a trace of anxiety in his heart. After inspecting the situation here and confirming the problem with the defenses, he flew towards a direction in the city with Jing Yuanji without time to rest and recover. There was a building in the city that was similar to the house in the secluded mountain. It was left behind by Yuan Kong after she came to the city. Speaking of which, it had been 1,770 years since that girl came to this place. The two of them came to the front of the house and gently pushed the door open. The internal structure was different from the house in the void. This small house had 3 floors. Yin Nuoxing's room was on the 3rd floor, but he had never used it, while Siyu and Feng Qinghuang's rooms were on the 2nd floor. In the hall on the 1st floor, Yuan Kong, who was wearing a light yellow dress, saw the door open and quickly went to open it. "Idiot, you're back. Where's my sister?" Yin Nuoxing pointed at his head and shook his head. "She's asleep. In the last period of time, she overdid it and couldn't hold on any longer. She fell asleep." After confirming that everything was fine, Yuan Kong heaved a sigh of relief. However, she seemed to have heard something worth paying attention to. She was slightly puzzled. In the last period of time? What time? What happened at the front line? The war has probably entered the 2nd phase. 100 million years after the abyssal death mist attacked the world of order, the war has gradually entered a period of balance. The underworld will probably need some time to deal with the 1% of their newly conquered territories. During this period of time, there will be a rare respite. But on the other hand, they may appear in front of us anytime. Yin Nuoxing closed the door. "How see you?" "Same old, no changes. She's sleeping there every day. There's no sign of her waking up." Yuan Kong spread out her hands. "Sister Qinghuang is by her side every day. She's fine, but it's not a good idea to go on like this. Idiot, you have to wake Sister Siyu up. Otherwise, I feel like something is missing at home." Yuan Kong took the battle robes that Jing Yuanji and Yin Nuoxing took off and whispered to them. Yin Nuoxing's expression froze. Home. Actually, at first glance, it could be considered a home. If it wasn't for the abyssal death mist, they had lived together for more than 100 million years. In concept, it did feel like a home, but in reality, Yin Nuoxing shook his head and didn't think much about it. He didn't have the time to think about it. What he needed to do now was to see Siyu and heal her. After that, he would adjust his condition. The abyssal death mist had attacked them for 100 million years. They had been defending against it for 100 million years. Even he felt that it was a little unbearable. She tiptoed to the 2nd floor and pushed open the door to Siyu's room. The sunlight from the void front line shone into the room through the window, making the room much brighter. Feng Qinghuang was sitting against the wall with a book in her hand. The door facing her suddenly opened. She raised her head and put down the book in her hand. She walked forward. "You're back." As soon as he opened the door, he felt a fragrant breeze. Yin Nuoxing instinctively opened his arms and hugged the girl tightly. I can rest for a while. How's the front line?" "It's good. The equilibrium period is here. The battle has entered the 2nd phase. It will be more difficult in the future. Rest well. Be careful." You too." This simple conversation had only been said a few times in the past 100 million years, but it was as if he had long been accustomed to it and had really integrated into his life. It was not until he heard this sentence that Yin Nuoxing felt completely relaxed. After a long time, Feng Qinghuang left Yin Nuoxing's arms and pulled him to the bedside. Then, she bent down and touched the face of the person on the bed. Xingxing is back." Yin Nuoxing leaned against the edge of the bed and sat down. The little girl lying on the bed had a rosy face. However, her body did not have a trace of vitality. Her soul had returned to silence. She lay there quietly, but it was as if she had already died. In a chaotic battle 1,000 years ago, the energy barrier was broken. Sea was penetrated by a huge manifestation using energy. Little Angel protected her soul and life. However, she seemed to have fallen into a deep slumber. Even after 1,000 years, there were still no signs of her waking up. 100 million years of peace. However, he did not expect that an accident would happen in 1,000 years. He was worried that there would be a second accident. After that, he threw Feng Qing Huang and Yuan Kong back. Yin Nuoxing's soul extended to his hand and gently placed it on Siyu's palm. He took in her condition. The power of the death mist in the abyss has been cleared. The damage caused by the laws has been repaired. The divine power protecting Ming is still working. It's fine. Don't worry. Siyu is fine. She can wake up. Feng Qing Huang was surprised. Yin Nuoxing patted Feng Qing Huang's hair and said with a smile, she still needs some time. The severe injury this time has broken through her seal. If there are no accidents, she will ascend to the next level when she wakes up. There will be no aftereffects. Feng Qing Huang let out a long sigh of relief. She smiled sweetly. Yin Nuoxing looked at the little girl on the bed. He held her little hand with both of his hands and gently transferred the power of order belonging to the observer into her body. The body and soul that had been silent for a long time suddenly became more active. Even the signs of life that had disappeared completely recovered. The sin of order, the order of the void, and all kinds of troublesome problems that belong to the conceptual level of the rules and other levels. Every piece of information was like a blow to the back of Yin Nuoxing's head. He saw stars and his eyes were dizzy. After she finished, she pursed her lips and pondered for a moment. Then she decided to add, that's it in a nutshell. Then what if it's more complicated? Yin Nuoxing was speechless. The little girl took a deep breath and started talking nonstop. Feng Qing Huang, who was listening by the side, sat on the edge of the bed and supported Yin Nuoxing. The latter opened his eyes wide and scratched his head. In the end, the little girl concluded, the order of the void is about to die. However, with a safety valve in place, the order of the void will not fall below its limit. You don't have to worry about that. It's just that in the current environment of the void, the order of the void is already quite weak. Nothing has happened yet, but after a while, you will probably see a huge change in the void. Some things that don't exist in this world will emerge from the depths of the void, and all sorts of demons and monsters will scramble to crawl out and participate in the dance party, the dance of demons. As the little girl spoke, she began to feel tired. She lay back on the bed and sighed tiredly. Yin Nuoxing scratched her head. Does this mean that the bottom layer of the void's rules and concepts will be reversed? That's right. Then what's the safety valve you mentioned? Is it a symbol of concept? Or is it something that actually exists? Yin Nuoxing frowned. It's just a concept. The order of the void will only be weakened. There won't be a time when it's out of order, unless... The little girl coughed and stared at Yin Nuoxing with her grayish-blue eyes. Unless there's a big change in the pattern of the void. The balance of the three elements of origin is completely messed up, and it's really over. Her silly laughter couldn't erase Yin Nuoxing's headache. The sin of order was probably the sin of the world. Then, the other strange things and the weakening of the order of the void were probably caused by the things that the underworld and the others had done in the lower plane. At that time, it was just a guess. Now it was confirmed. Those things had something to do with the pattern of the void. They were planning to tamper with the rules of the void. If things went wrong, the entire void would be destroyed. They were really playing a big game. After she spoke, the room fell into a long and strange silence. There were only 4 sounds of breathing. The little girl's eyes were closed as if she had fallen asleep. Yin Nuoxing sat on the edge of the bed with her hands crossed over her mouth. She looked gloomy as if a storm was coming. Since you've come to me, you must have some plans, right? After a long time, Yin Nuoxing slowly opened her mouth and looked at the little girl who had opened her eyes. Tell me about your plan. How do you plan to solve these things? Chapter 1482. The pattern of the void. This concept was given to it by the beings living in the void. Generally speaking, only the void would affect itself. For example, if it suddenly flipped over, both order and non-order would shudder. Or if it suddenly felt sleepy, some non-order domains would surge with a wave of energy and then be pinned down by the power of order in the void to give it a good beating. In the end, it would be as if nothing had happened. The void itself was inclined towards order. The existence of non-order was a small loophole in the void, but the impact was not big, and the problem was not big. It was like a living being. Before its spirit suffered an inhuman heavy blow, it sought to survive. It was instinctive to want to live, and it was the same for the void to develop towards order. This was the situation that Yun Nuo Planet and Mo Ing had talked about that day. It was not arranged by anyone, but the situation that the void wanted to develop was just the situation that the void wanted to develop. Therefore, in most cases, the patterns of the void leaned towards order. Order was the normal state of the void, while non-order were loopholes that allowed them to survive in certain nooks and crannies before they attracted the attention of the Great Order. History had never recorded what would happen if the patterns of the void leaned towards non-order. And from a literal point of view, the void would probably be filled with the power of non-order. But that is not the case. The pattern of the void was actually in a state of balance from the beginning. It was said to show order, but the void of order was huge enough to attract everyone's attention. So from a cognitive point of view, the pattern of the void is order. But there is a concept that many do not know. Less than half of the people in the void know about this concept, the chaotic void. Yin Nuoxing sat in the hall, explaining to Jing Yuanji and the others some trivial things about the void. The chaotic void and the void of order are the same size. They are both infinite, and the two voids exist independently. The chaotic void is located at the edge of the void of order, and there is an eternal zone of chaos. The chaotic law is the only void law there. But compared to the chaotic void, it is normal, and there will not be any strange phenomena. Because over there, non-order is normal, and order is also allowed to exist. Beings with the power of order will not be suppressed by the non-order just because they enter the chaotic void. Jing Yuanji and the others who were listening in the soul were stunned. Why can order survive in the chaotic void? This time, it was Hui who answered. The chaotic void is more like an ancient and eternal banished land to the entire void. You should know that the world lights will drift in the void. Huge world groups will drift very slowly, and due to the condensation of the great order and rules, they will not drift very far, and will slowly return to their original place. Independent world lights are wanderers. They will drift little by little in the void. They will drift along the waves endlessly, and their destination is the void. Yin Nuoxing continued Hui's words. The non-order rules of the void of chaos will slowly disintegrate the world lights that drift in and return them to the void. Some world lights that are strong enough and have a thick enough world barrier can stay in the void of chaos. And when they leave the void of order, they will not be disintegrated by the void of order due to their age. The void of chaos is relatively lazy, and if it cannot consume something, it will keep it and not deal with it. In fact, if you're interested, you can go to the void of chaos and deliberately search, and you can find some world lights that are very old left in that place. Generally speaking, we rarely go to the void of chaos. You are the same, which is why we rarely talk about it. The pattern of the void we usually talk about refers to the void of order, which is usually order. But now, Yin Nuoxing muttered to herself for a moment. Now, the order of the void of order has slightly declined, which is not a good sign. The most direct thing that can affect us now is that the power of the abyssal death shroud will gradually increase. As the order of the world of order declines, the power of the non-order forces that are suppressed on the whole, such as the abyssal death shroud and the underworld, will gradually return to normal. There was a series of gasps in their souls, and it was so loud that their teeth almost fell out. Don't be so nervous. Maple is right, but you didn't hear him out. Hui waved his hand and said, the abyssal death shroud and the underworld can basically be considered as the dangers of the primeval realm. That realm can completely offset the discomfort brought to them by the world of order. Therefore, Even if they really recover their power by suppressing the order of the world of order, they will not be more than 3% stronger than they are now. But that 3% is still quite a bit of pressure for the entire Void defensive line. Yin Nuashing slowly sat up straight. For us, the situation is still fine. If we were to fight alone, I could suppress the battle on one side of the Void, and each of you could simultaneously fight against 10,000 peak origin manifestations. But if we include that 3%, it is not as simple as having 300 more. It could be a threshold that exceeds the worst effect of a chain reaction, and I might become the one who has to face two primeval heavenly gods at the same time. Everyone who had just breathed a sigh of relief became very nervous again. No matter what, every bit of strength the enemy had was a bit of pressure for them. Under the advantage of the enemy's time, place, and numbers, let alone 3%, even 1% would be enough to make them feel uneasy. We could not help but sigh as he listened to the whispers. This was probably one of the reasons why the underworld kept tampering with the Void. If they sped up the roulette just a little bit, the balance of all things in the Void would be broken. They wanted to settle all of this faster. Leaving the people of the Divine Realm to discuss among themselves, Yin Nuashing, Hui, I Ching, and the others turned to the other side of the soul communication channel. Hui looked left and right, then turned his gaze to Yin Nuashing. How was that little girl? Yin Nuashing was stunned for a moment, then smiled faintly. She's fine. She has recovered. The next time she wakes up, she will probably break through to the next realm. She is only 100 years later than Qing Huang. Hui nodded. What do you plan to do this time? Let's go together? Yin Nuashing gritted her teeth, her fingers unconsciously rubbing her forehead. She closed her eyes and looked sleepy and distressed. Seeing her like this, I Ching, Qing Jun, and Jing Yuanji did not know what to say, so they lowered their heads in silence. Taking a deep breath, Yin Nuashing rubbed her face and said, the things that should be solved still have to be solved. Delaying won't let the things that should happen end, just like this war. From the beginning, I said that this was something that we would face sooner or later. No matter how much we prepare, it will not be enough. Since we haven't even prepared enough, we can only use our lives to make up for this gap. If we can save 1% of the victory, then it will be worth it. Jing Yuanji had been looking at her eyes. Suddenly, she lowered her head and said softly, but if we make a mistake, we will lose everything. The atmosphere instantly became even more silent. Yin Nuashing shook his head helplessly and laughed bitterly. One wrong step leads to many wrong steps. Therefore, they can't make any mistakes. They can't make any mistakes. They have to accurately find the one and only one in the tens of millions of numbers. One chance, but countless events. It was too difficult. Yin Nuashing waved her hand. We have no choice. We can only take one step at a time. If we stop moving forward because of fear, that would be the worst result. Use the least amount of power, the least amount of people, and quickly end the battle. One route, one chance, that's it. We, you, and I will go. The rest of you guard the Void. The abyssal death mist isn't a human. Their consciousness won't be able to determine whether or not the important people guarding the city are present. Yin Nuashing said. Seeing that Jing Yuanji was about to make a move, he hurriedly gave her a look. The latter's pretty face trembled when she was glanced at, but she could only hold back her words and hold them back. We arrange things over there and then come find me. We will wait for you here. After the private meeting on this side, and after arranging things for the people of the celestial realm, the soul communication ended. Yin Nuashing's vision returned to his body. Just as he sat down and breathed a sigh of relief, he felt a pair of bright eyes staring at him. He turned his head and saw Jing Yuanji sitting on the sofa. She was staring at him as if saying, "Why didn't you bring me along?" He could not help but smile bitterly. Although the abyssal death mist can't tell, the commander can't leave all at once. That little guy is only suitable for mobilizing his own people and the people of the world of order. But they still don't understand the fighting style of the celestial realm very well. There must be a commander of the celestial realm in this direction. Yin Nuashing got up and walked over. He bent down and reached out to touch Jing Yuanji's hair. When I'm not here, I'll leave this battle line to you. Okay. Jing Yuanji lowered her head. She did not look very happy. She would obey his orders unconditionally, but it did not mean that she would feel happy. Yin Nuoxing nodded and rubbed her soft hair. He was about to get up and go to the second floor to inform Feng Qing Wang when Jing Yuanji suddenly looked up. Master Feng. Yin Nuoxing looked at her. Jing Yuanji's red lips opened and closed several times before she said, "Come back soon." Yin Nuoxing smiled and nodded. He waved his hand casually. "Don't worry. In this void, there are indeed many people who can kill me, but there is no one who can kill me silently." Seeing his figure disappear around the corner of the stairs, Jing Yuanji's tense expression relaxed. She knocked her head in distress. "Is it really okay for you to do this, Sister Jing?" Jing Yuanji was stunned for a moment. As soon as she looked up, she saw a beautiful figure in light yellow walking out slowly from the other side of the hall and sitting in front of her. Listening to what she said, she probably saw the scene just now. Jing Yuanji breathed a sigh of relief. There was a relieved smile on her face. "I'm used to it. I just hope that I can stand by Master Feng's side and help him when he needs it. This is quite good." Looking at Jing Yuanji stroking her hair, Yuan Kong muttered, "That idiot is not as slow as you think. He knows some things very clearly, but if you don't say it, he won't say it either. Just tacitly pretend that he doesn't know anything." Although with that idiot's temper, there may not be a good result if he is exposed, but there is no need to worry that the situation will worsen. You should know better than anyone else what kind of personality your Master Feng has. "I know," Jing Yuanji said rather freely. "It's just that there are some words that are clearly at the tip of my tongue. I tried to break free several times, but couldn't say it. In the end, maybe I'm scared." Yuan Kong muttered a vague reply and turned to look outside. His bright black eyes looked at the city that simulated night and the void beyond. The death shroud of the abyss was not far away. Between them and this place was the boundary between life and death. It was not as simple as a short distance in the void. In these 100 million years, countless lives had died and revived, lived and died, died and died, and some had truly died. Time in this world would quietly erase their traces until no one remembered who they were. This was a battlefield that was not recognized and remembered by anything. "Look at the void." Jing Yuanji paused and turned to look at her. Following her gaze, she looked at the void and heard her continue. "Magnificence, danger, the unknown, the so-called tomorrow, hope, the future, these things are unpredictable in true order, let alone on the border of death. From the day we set foot here, our lives and deaths are only half in our own hands. The other half is handed over to the nonsensical destiny. I don't know when I'll die. I don't know when I'll disappear. Maybe the joke I made just a second ago became my last words. Maybe the last time I saw you inadvertently became my last farewell. Maybe that laughter was my last voice. Even that greeting could only be engraved in my mind. Then, as I die, it will fade away from this world bit by bit. Time will mercilessly wash it away. In the end, nothing will happen. Everything will become meaningless nothingness." Yuan Kong gently raised his head and looked directly at her. "Jing Jija, that idiot, he also has a limit. He will also disappear one day. You will also have it. We will all have it. Some words, if we don't say it now, we will never be able to say it." Jing Yuanji was speechless. At this time, as his adjutant, she knew better than anyone that he had already reached his limit. From 100 million years ago, when he was not fully recovered, he had been forcing himself until today. If he had not already torn himself to the limit, even to the point where he could not take care of himself, he would not have experienced that thrilling experience 1,000 years ago. If he did not force himself, this battle line would become forced. But she hoped that he would not force himself. But these are not things she could decide. There will always be a chance. Jing Yuanji's shapely eyebrows curved slightly as she smiled faintly. Yuan Kong stared at her. After a long while, he sighed deeply. "Forget it. Why should I worry? The big idiot actually had a second sentence, but he didn't say it out loud. If I don't come back, that brilliant firework will be my last words to the void. She had heard this from her sister once. He did not say it out loud, probably because he did not want her to worry. Going deep into the enemy's rear, especially in a state of war, the danger was self-evident. Yin Nuoxing did not intend to bring anyone with him. After informing Feng Qing Wang, the little girl also knew the danger this time. She did not intend to come with him. She just kept him in a room for a long time before letting him go. At the edge of the city wall, a little girl in a gray-blue dress was looking at the other side of the void. The death mist of the abyss was like a huge wall in the void, blocking all communication between the middle plane and the other side. At this moment, even the deep void was almost completely sealed. It would not be easy to slip through. She felt something behind her. She turned back and looked at Yin Nuoxing, who had just landed on the city wall. "You're finally out? Did your family let you go?" Yin Nuoxing rolled his eyes. "There are some things that I still have to tell them properly, so that they won't really say this is the last time I see them. But I can't say anything, so I can only tell them and listen to them. Can you tell me your plan now?" Yin Nuoxing walked to her side and pressed his hands on the city wall. He looked at the death mist of the abyss. "What's the sins of order? In the world of order, it should be called the sins of the world, right?" The little girl looked at him with a little surprise. "You've seen it before? Describe it to me. Let me confirm it." Not only had he seen it before, Yin Nuoxing's cheeks twitched violently. He began to feel depressed when he thought of those bad memories. He sighed and did not bother to say anything. With a thought, a part of the sins of the world that he was infected with emerged from his body. "Is this it?" The little girl was stunned. Yes. But how did you get infected with this?" "It's a long story." Yin Nuoxing waved his hand. "Let's not talk about the reason first. The sins of the world will attract each other at the conceptual level of the rules. If I run over there, I might suck them all in my body. This is not something good. Even at my level, I don't want to touch it easily. You know what I mean, right?" "Oh." The little girl was stunned. After listening to him, she nodded. "Don't worry. I'm here to ask for your help. I won't hurt you. I have a way to shield you from the sins of order. This way, it won't attract that part of the sins of order. But you have to reach out your hand first. I feel that there's something wrong with the sins of order on you." The little girl grabbed his hand and carefully sensed it for a while. Suddenly, her expression changed. She shook her head. There's a little difference. If the sins of the world on you are divided into two parts, one of them will be the sins of order, and the other, Yin Nuoxing had an idea. The sins of chaos? The little girl rolled her eyes at him. "You're taking it for granted. The other part is the shadow of order. The combination of these two parts is your sins of the world." Yin Nuoxing laughed awkwardly and scratched his head. "So were these two things the destruction energy left behind when the void was born?" The little girl put down his hand and continued to look at the other side of the void. "When the void decides that the world needs to carry out a destruction one day, it will use these things to trigger an interesting reaction. Boom." Yin Nuoxing looked at the little girl's beaming face and felt that she was probably talking about the Great Samsara. However, he was a little puzzled by the Great Samsara, so he quickly said, "It's the heavenly deity. It's related to the heavenly god of origins. As I said before, the void changed after the heavenly god of origins fell. That was one of them. After that great upheaval, these things appeared in this world. Let me put it simply. The sin of order, you can simply understand it as destruction, consumption, and waste. They are the trash products of order, one of the three factors of origin. As for the shadow of order, it is the shadow of everything in the world of order. When you were born, your shadow would be born as well. These two occasionally exist alone, occasionally coexist, and when they pile up on the conceptual level of the void's rules, they would form what you call the sins of the world. I call it the root of destruction, but I think your name might be more suitable, so I'll borrow it." Yin Nuoxing was dumbfounded. To put it simply, the consumption of order would give birth to sins of order, and everything born in the void would give birth to shadows of order. The two combined to form the sins of the world. Wait a minute, will these things dissipate naturally? Yin Nuoxing asked nervously. Well, actually, they will, but the speed is very, very slow. The little girl scratched her head. You haven't been to a special layer in the concept of origin. That is the place where the sins of the world are stored. Let me tell you, the Holy Yuan realm is like that. The little girl said, I thought about it later. It's probably because the heavenly deity of origin and the others had fallen. Something in the void dissipated with them. The fact that the sins of the world could not be dealt with effectively is a proof. Moreover, this is a fatal thing to the world of order. If it keeps accumulating until it reaches a certain level, guess what will happen? Yun Nuoxing's face twitched. Didn't you just say that there was an interesting reaction with a bone? Reenact the great turmoil of 11 eras? The little girl was startled. Oh, you got it right. Yun Nuoxing sighed. All right. He had thoroughly found the cause of the great samsara. So this was what it was all about. Although it was a little different from the 3 factors of origin that he had guessed before, it was still related. I don't really care about the survival of the world of order. However, I can only ask for your help to find the core of the primordial realm. So, I can only pay a little attention to it. The little girl spread her hands and said very frankly, we will be dealing with those things later. It is also to slow down the layout of the void. Since they are trash products, if they're piled up in a void for a long time, the void will collapse. Yin Nuoxing's expression became very strange. So, they're going to clean up. Chapter 1483. Not long after waiting on the city wall, we followed the void and came to the place where Yun Nuoxing and the others were guarding. As soon as he appeared, he saw Yun Nuoxing's gloomy and strange expression. He immediately felt a little strange. He was stunned on the spot for a few seconds before approaching. What's wrong, Foam? Are you trying to scare the death mist away with that expression? Yun Nuoxing, who was still nagging, turned around and looked at Hui. He could not help but sigh. After I tell you, you will probably have the same expression too. Hui was stunned and put on an ignorant expression. In the next second, a lot of information flooded into his mind. A minute later, there was another guy on the city wall with a sad expression on his face. The guards not far away were stunned. They were curious about what they had talked about to cause such a change in attitude. Yin Nuoxing suddenly grinned stiffly. He felt that his style was getting lower and lower. In the realm of the gods. Oh, he was going to be an observer for almost 90 years, a maintenance worker, and now he was going to be a cleaner of the order world. In summary, he was going to be a gatekeeper and a cleaner. Occasionally, he would take on the part-time job of fixing the big and small things inside the gate. This job could be done by any old gatekeeper. That was why he was getting weirder and weirder. What kind of life was he living? All right, isn't it just being a cleaner? You guys have spent a lot of time cleaning in the realm of the gods, right? Is there a need to be so conflicted? She shook her head helplessly and said, anyway, in our line of work, no matter how you look at it, it's still the same. Looking at the big picture, to put it bluntly, we're just a bunch of miserable people who have to do something that no one wants to get involved with. Even the old man who looks after the mountain gate is considered a low-level job. The things that we have to deal with, if we don't do it right, we might end up killing ourselves first. If we do it right, we might accidentally push the world of order into another dangerous situation, and we even have to be responsible for some irrelevant people. It's not fun at all. What does the world of order have to do with me? Yun Nuoxing felt that the girl's last sentence was quite correct. However, there are some things that must be done. This world, right? Although it's tattered and not fun. Sigh, there's no point in saying so much. Some things really have to be done by us. It took Hui a while to recover from that low and negative state. He gave a thumbs up with an inspiring smile on his face. There's no time to lose. We're ready. Let's go. Yin Nuoxing and the little girl looked at each other and rolled their eyes. As expected of an optimist, there was no change even after entering the primeval realm. The little girl stuffed a silver-white energy rune into Yun Nuoxing's hand and whispered to him, Here, this thing can prevent you from attracting the sins of order and the shadows of order. It also won't attract the sins of the world. Can you rest assured now? Yun Nuoxing held the energy rune and let it fuse into his body. The part of the sins of the world in his body became completely silent because of the energy rune. Previously, it was like water in a deep well, but now, even the water had frozen. There was no movement or person. He heaved a long sigh of relief. Although the Empyrean god of origin was not afraid of the erosion of the sins of the world, he did not want to experience that situation again. It was like stuffing all the negative and dark thoughts of the entirety Yuan realm into his mind in an instant. It was not just a matter of some emotions and mentality. It was stuffing countless half of the consciousness into his soul and spirit. Chaos and disorder, turning his soul and spirit world into hell. That battle was even more terrifying than the one they were facing now. Some soft golden light appeared in his soul and enveloped his soul and spirit, calming his agitated and uneasy heart when he recalled that experience. Yin Nuoxing suddenly came back to his senses and realized that he had almost attracted the sins of the world again. He could not help but sigh. "Let's go." Yin Nuoxing looked at Hui and the little girl and nodded. "We're ready." The little girl stretched out her hands and grabbed each of them. A little light flashed in her grayish-blue eyes. After a moment, she gently closed her eyes. A grayish-blue cloud appeared around the three of them and disappeared from the city wall as they were enveloped by the cloud. When Yin Nuoxing opened his eyes again, he saw a dark and silent space in front of him. His body and spirit showed a little self-adjusting movement, which told him that he had left the space of the main realm and the space of order. They were now at the bottom level of the void of order. However, there was a considerable degree of non-order in this place. Its nature was gradually changing. This was not good news. At least, it was not good news for them. The abyssal death shroud has seeped into the bottom level of the void. "Phone, look over there." Yin Nuoxing followed Huey's direction and looked forward. A large black cloud with a dark red color was wriggling like some kind of huge human organ. He was hallucinating, as if some strange creatures would crawl out in the next second, with broken arms and legs, heads and no hands. All kinds of things that affected his appetite. He had seen a lot in the past 100 million years, so when he saw this large cloud now, he felt that it was ready to put on a good show with him here. That's the border of the void of order. Well, the border of the world of order, the place infected by the abyssal death shroud. The middle realm and the lower realm are still in the void of order, but the order there is more chaotic than here. A large number of chaotic forces are wantonly destroying and seizing the power of order, twisting it into a stick, kneading it into some ugly things, and fusing it into the abyssal death shroud, or moving it to other places. The little girl said softly, "They're seriously damaging the void, but, to be honest, there's no one in the void who has the power to stop them. I can't do anything, and I guess you guys can't do anything either." Before the void upheaval. I don't know how the lost races of the previous era survived, but now that the gods of origin are gone, there's indeed no one who can stop them. Yin Nuoxing sighed deeply. The war at the end of the mythological era had consumed too many things. First, there was the fall of the gods of origin, and if the current situation of this era was reflected, there might be countless primeval gods who had fallen during the end of the mythological era as well. When a large-scale disaster broke out in the void, if a race or faction survived at a small price, then the next era, which was this era, would basically be their world. They could do whatever they wanted with the void as if it was a game. Moreover, in this era, there was no primeval god. Oh, there was one, but it wouldn't be of much use since there were more than a dozen of them. Yin Nuo and the others did not know what kind of role the underworld played at the end of the God's Age. Anyway, since they were able to preserve their power so well, they were probably not a particularly conspicuous existence in the previous era. They either hid themselves very well, or their race was very good at hiding. They survived the war where the origin heavenly god fell, survived the great reincarnation caused by her, and then reigned supreme in this world. That was why it was said that hiding in the end was victory. So, they were actually Voldemort in the previous era? Well, let's not talk about that for now. Let's take a look at the abyssal death shroud in front of them. Yin Nuoxing believed that they only needed to poke it gently, and it would explode like a hedgehog. Then, its attention would be diverted from the present realm to the bottom level of the void, and a great battle would follow. The abyssal death shroud seal was not so tight before. Hui came back from the abyssal death shroud and shook his head at the two. The seal is too tight. Although I have entered the realm of primeval and it's not difficult to open a passage, it's too difficult to not attract their attention. After entering this realm, I can see things more clearly, such as the abyssal death shroud. Now, I see it like a huge living thing, and every inch of it has consciousness. Let's not talk about that. I have a way to pass through without affecting the abyssal death shroud, but we must be quick. The little girl waved her hand and stepped forward, fiddling with the void with her power of divine destruction. Yin Nuoxing looked at her for a while, and then turned to Hui. You just said that the abyssal death shroud is a living thing. Yes, but I can't say for sure, because they're just some energy constructs. Although they have consciousness, it's just some consciousness and weak. Well, it's not even spiritual intelligence. They don't even have a breath of life. But I can tell from the state of the abyssal death shroud that it's a huge living thing, like a beast crawling in the void. Don't you think it's weird? Hui shrugged helplessly. Yin Nuoxing reached out and twirled his hair. From the perspective of the primeval god? Hui nodded. Yin Nuoxing pouted. Then there's nothing I can do. I can't help you. You can think about it yourself, and let us know if you've figured out anything. He suddenly shut up. When he saw Hui staring at him with a gaze that gave him goosebumps, he felt uncomfortable all over. He shook his head in disgust, and his hair was all over his face. You brat, it's not easy for you to step into the realm of primeval. Why don't you think about anything? Do you still need me to help you? Hui's nod made Yin Nuoxing even more speechless. He sighed and stared at the abyssal death shroud for a while, and said, I really can't see anything different. Let me remind you, the abyssal death shroud was extracted from a certain primeval god. Perhaps it contains its power, its rules, its order, its divinity, and its divine right. No matter what characteristics the abyssal death shroud shows, it's inseparable from the primeval god. After you enter the realm of primeval, you can probably see some things that you can't see before. Take your time to get used to it. As he spoke, a blue vein appeared on Yin Nuoxing's forehead. He fiercely punched Hui and scolded him. When the latter heard it, he just scratched his head and laughed dryly. All right, you two, it's time for us to go. Yin Nuoxing and Hui felt their arms being pulled at the same time. They looked down and saw a layer of grayish-blue energy, light lingering around the little girl's body. This was her power of divine destruction. Now that they felt it again, well, it was really a little weak. The little girl didn't know what rude things they were thinking about. She stared at the abyssal death shroud with full attention. After a while, a wave of chaotic energy suddenly shrouded them. Yin Nuoxing and Hui felt their bodies sink, as if there was a void pressing on them, squeezing them hard into the void, trying to let them pass through from the other side. Her voice still echoed in their ears. Don't resist. It started to teleport. It was as if the moment when the world was born and the world was split open, the movement spread from head to toe. At that moment, they saw through the changes of time, the vicissitudes of the world, the void was destroyed, and the order was born. Then they arrived. When they came back to their senses, Yin Nuoxing and Hui had found that the abyssal death shroud in front of them had disappeared. It was all behind them. Is this the special power of your power of divine destruction? Yin Nuoxing looked around curiously, recalling the movement just now. It was hard to describe. He didn't feel the change of space or anything like that. In short, there was no movement of teleportation. Its combat power isn't very good, but in terms of control of the void and order, it's probably stronger than your power of divine destruction. The little girl nodded. Just now, we were teleported through the collapse of the void, just like entering the interior of the desert from quicksand. The space we are in now is defined as the interior. Yin Nuoxing made no sound. It was using the principle that the void was continuous in all spatial levels. Even if the abyssal death shroud separated the void and order on both sides, it was useless. Its separation was built in the void. In other words, well, probably the primeval heavenly god couldn't stop this little girl's void jump. Speaking of which, why did he feel that it was a bit like the power of a divine right? Could it be that there was some connection between it, and the primeval heavenly god that he didn't understand? But now was not the time to think too much. Yun Nuashing suppressed the many questions in his mind and turned to look into the distance. They had crossed the abyssal death shroud and arrived at the rear. It was still the middle plane. The chaos of order was enough to prevent the void from condensing and giving birth to a source world. The order and activity of the void had dropped to a very low level and was very close to the threshold. When the threshold was completely reached, the collapse of order in other parts of the void would accelerate, and when the entire order of the void reached the threshold, chaos would descend. Not far away was the boundary between the middle plane and the lower plane. Most of the abyssal death shroud had gathered behind them. Many of them were floating randomly in the void like patrolling guards. The little girl tried her best to choose a safe place when she teleported. All activities here were weakened to the point of almost stopping. It was very quiet. The abyssal death shroud had no so-called defensive power, if the island-like abyssal death shroud floating in the void did not count. But no matter what, this was still a place occupied by the enemy, so it was impossible for it to be peaceful. How far could the three grasshoppers jump in here? Well, that would depend on when the death mist in the abyss would turn its attention to them. In fact, they could also feel the flow of energy here. There is a huge amount of energy from the middle and lower planes that carried the energy of the void and sent it to the front lines. If it wasn't for the fact that the energy of the void was limitless, even tens of millions of world light orbs would not be enough. We have come to a good place. There is a point of distortion of order in front of us. Destroying it will reduce the pressure of the void of order, a very limited amount of pressure. The little girl pulled Yin Nuashing's arm and pointed at a large blob of distorted mixture in front of them. Yin Nuashing looked forward. He had noticed that thing a few minutes ago. It was a blob of disgusting mixture. It looked like vomit mixed with garbage that had not been treated for hundreds of years. Oh, it was a large piece of melted ice cream. Well, he had recognized it long ago. But the aesthetic standards of the underworld were really unflattering. Looking at the distorted mixture in front of him, looking at the blobs of derivatives, he would have killed the primeval god of the beginning if they did not change it. Maybe they had really tried their best. The large mass of mixture in front of them, from its appearance and the aura it released, was quite disgusting. It was a distorted creation of many broken world-like clusters and world fragments, allowing their secondary void law to fuse in the void. Thus, the last part was made up by Yun Nuashing. He had no idea what the underworld was doing with these things. That's right, he was still not completely sure, but there were many guesses. This is a newly formed, distorted mixture. I have a way to completely shield this part of the void. The time limit is 4 hours. The little girl's hand glowed with a grayish-blue light. Yin Nuashing's heart skipped a beat. 4 hours. Once we make a move, we have to destroy everything as quickly as possible within 4 hours and then retreat. Once your shield is activated, they will sense it. The little girl nodded and stretched her hand forward. You two decide when to attack. I have already found a few points that are convenient for us to get there. No need to prepare. Let's start now. The moment you seal it, Hui and I will attack. Yin Nuashing moved his hands, and a nether void sword and magic circle appeared beside him. The twisted ice cream did not have any defensive power around it. There were only some runes of the death mist of the abyss or the power of chaos, or some other chains or barriers put together. It was hard to tell what was so special about it. If they underestimated it, they might die in these 4 hours. It was better to be careful and then attack. Hui roared. In an instant, the grayish-blue barrier burst out like a circle of sound waves. In an instant, it completely enveloped the void and merged into the void. At this moment, the situation inside and outside of the void could not be observed. Hui's primeval energy gushed out like a storm. Yin Nuashing cast magic circle after magic circle. Both of them aimed their attacks at the melted ice cream. So far, it was still their turn. Then, rumble. In the next second, the sealed void rumbled and shook. The mixed objects seemed to have sensed the appearance of hostile targets. Some huge, new manifestations that had never been seen before appeared from the void. They looked like a mixture of huge human bodies, wild beasts, and magical beasts. Groups of them crawled out of the void and raised the weapons in their hands. Some even raised their mutated claws. Their moon-sized eyes stared at Yin Nuashing and the other two. The abyssal death mist's aura swept out like a storm. I knew they were up to no good. If such an important place doesn't have any defense, I will eat it raw. Foam, you go destroy the core. Leave these minions to me. Hui hurriedly said a few words like exploding beans. Yin Nuashing nodded, and his figure rushed out with tens of thousands of magic circles. In just a flash, he bypassed the hundreds of new models of big guys. They noticed him and wanted to turn around, but before that, they were attracted by Huey's attack. A vigorous battle suddenly broke out. Yin Nuashing had just arrived in front of the mixed object. Just as he was thinking about what to do, a slight movement in the void around him stunned him. He turned around and saw a hill rising a few hundred meters behind him. A group of small manifestations appeared. Yin Nuashing noticed them. He thought for a moment, then stabbed his sword into the outermost barrier of the thing. Before he could destroy the barrier, he was hit in the face by the energy of the abyssal death mist. The abyssal death mist that blotted out the sky and earth transformed into tens of thousands of attacks that came at his face. In an instant, his order barrier was destroyed. This thing's reaction is really fast. Yin Nuashing smacked his lips impatiently. He frowned as he looked at the close combat manifestations behind him that were attacking him from afar. Wielding the Netherworld Ruined sword, he drew an arc in the air, and a beam of energy sword light swept out, turning the barrier and the group of manifestations into ashes. He abruptly fell into the inner region. Just as he entered the inner region, the void began to tremble once again, and this time, it was becoming more and more intense. It was as if there was a volcano hidden in the void that was about to awaken from its slumber. Yin Nuashing frowned even more. He casually used the magic circles to pour energy in to test the defensive strength of this fused object. In the end, it was quite tough. If he didn't accumulate a large amount of energy, he probably wouldn't be able to destroy it so easily. Under the catalysis of the abyssal death mist, those laws that originally belonged to the power of order had turned into the enemy's power and were now obstructing his attack. It has a core point of order. It's probably located slightly below the center of this thing. If you destroy that core point, you'll probably be able to completely destroy it. The little girl's voice rang out in time, but it caused Yin Nuashing's eyebrows to twitch even more. Wasn't this the rhythm of wanting to kill his way in? He looked at the many manifestations that had appeared in the void around him and rolled his eyes fiercely. The defensive power here was actually all at the peak of the source level. And there were so many of them. They really wanted nothing more than to stuff an entire army of manifestations into every nook and cranny, right? Chapter 1484. Boom! This was the umpteenth time. Energy flashes that covered a large area suddenly burst out in the void. Golden and silver energy scattered all over the void, forming an aurora-like curtain that hung down from the void. It was as thin as a veil, and one could almost push it away with one's hand. That was the sound of Hui bursting out with the power of the primeval realm as he fought against those bulky manifestations. In the past 100 million years, he had been half a warrior and half a commander, and he had never had the time to fight to his heart's content. Now, he had come to the enemy's home to do whatever he wanted, to eliminate the tyrant for the people, and to kill Tiger Feng. To put it bluntly, he was taking advantage of the void being sealed to have fun here. The primeval realm was indeed the primeval realm. Even if a tank class had entered the primeval realm, he would still have a lot of energy to throw a tantrum and roll around. Yin Nuashing stuck close to that black thing and would occasionally be affected by his holy energy storm. However, he was now in the order attribute, so it would not affect him much. It was just that his enemies would be killed along the way. Why is this guy acting so recklessly as if he had been holding it in for 100 million years? Yin Nuashing put her hand over her eyes and looked into the distance. She looked at the holy light that was bursting out in the void that was comparable to a new energy star. She felt blind and could not help but lower her head and mumble. So what if you are in the primeval realm? You can do whatever you want just because you are in the primeval realm? He was still a little regretful that he could not enter that realm. Although he was now more violent and powerful than he was 100 million years ago, he was still stuck here after almost 90 years. Just thinking about it made him feel tired. Yin Nuoxing sighed deeply. He looked at the black land under his feet. It was the size of a planet. Looking into the distance, he could see some protrusions that looked like hills in the horizon. He was looking at this thing. It was not realistic to blow up its core directly. It would take too much time to tear it apart layer by layer. It would take too much energy to do a big one, and it would damage his status. In this way, he would not be able to do much damage in 4 hours. Moreover, it was better not to do anything that risked their lives in this dangerous place. If there was really a death omen star shining above their heads, and they saw a patrol team of primeval gods looking at them as soon as they stepped out of the door, then they would not be able to escape. Destruction was a technical job. Coincidentally, Yinhua planet was born to be a destroyer. He had torn down a city, a star, and even a primordial realm. It only took him a short while to figure out the structure of this thing. He could then blow it up from the inside out and back again. A chain of energy bombardment would be enough. It's still easier to tear people apart. Yin Nuoxing muttered to himself. Tearing people apart was a technical job. Well, tearing apart a strange creation that twisted the rules was a technical job. Moreover, he needed to use a delicate dismantling and not a huge explosion. Bang! Bang! Boom! Groups of manifestations emerged from the ground behind him. They bared their fangs and brandished their claws as they charged at him with their ugly faces that could ward off evil spirits. His face darkened. The netherworld ruin sword that stood beside him suddenly drew an arc in the air, clearing away the rubbish that emerged from the ground. Yin Nuoxing squatted down and raised his right hand with his fingers wide open. Bright white and dark red energy intertwined and merged, gathering in the center of his palm. Then, as he pressed his palm down, the energy surged into the black ground. The bright white and dark red energy was like a drop of paint that suddenly dripped onto a piece of white cloth. That drop of color rapidly spread in all directions. At the same time, it pierced into the depths of the ground like a thorny thorn, leaving behind patches of energy runes along the way. And just as those energy runes appeared, Yin Nuoxing suddenly felt the black ground tremble violently, as if it was afraid. This strange creation of twisted the rules, which did not even have a consciousness, was actually afraid. The energy runes that first appeared began to explode after a delay of more than 10 seconds. The explosive energy surged out in all directions with the energy runes as the core. The energy formed into sharp thorns that easily tore apart the structure of this creation of twisted rules, detonating its own energy along the way, causing a huge chain of energy explosions within it. Moreover, the explosive energy was all directed towards the center. It would take a while for the outer layer to observe the destruction. A 3,000-meter-tall manifestation suddenly appeared above Yin Nuoxing's head, causing him to be shocked. His other hand hurriedly grabbed the netherworld ruin sword and was about to get rid of it, but it suddenly stopped. Its huge body mysteriously began to dissipate, as if it was no longer able to maintain its form. Yin Nuoxing held the netherworld ruins sword in a slight daze. He looked at the situation before him and realized the core is beginning to collapse. The part that controls the abyssal death mist manifestation is collapsing first? Or is it saying that it can no longer maintain the manifestation's existence? The process of thinking only lasted for a few seconds. Yin Nuoxing continued to pour energy downwards in a frenzy. The energy spike had already led the army of thousands towards the core of the creation of twisted rules. It trembled even more violently, as if an entire planet was trembling in the palm of his hand. Yin Nuoxing let out a soft cry in his heart. All the energy he controlled had already disintegrated layer after layer of defenses, exposing the core to his sight. Just as he was about to pierce through it with a single blow, a very weak consciousness suddenly barged into his mind, causing his mind to tremble. He felt that it was calling for help and pleading. Other than that, he also saw many things. They were blurry, but seemed to symbolize the destruction of the void and the burning of thousands of worlds. What? What is this? Yin Nuoxing's heart trembled. The energy that was leading the army of thousands froze halfway. Even he himself was a little confused as his mind flashed wildly. It had only been a little more than 4.5 minutes since the little girl activated the seal. There was still time, there was still a choice, and he should have been decisive at this time. However, there were some reasons. First of all, excluding the reason that he was soft-hearted. He had killed decisively for dozens of eras, and being soft-hearted was a joke. He was just curious. They had never truly understood what these things from the underworld were. Now, it was actually sending him a distress signal. Madness? Order? It did not even have consciousness. No, it really did not have consciousness. Was this not a sign that it had rationality? Perhaps. This was an opportunity. Yin Nuoxing gritted his teeth and suddenly turned to Hui and shouted, "Hui, I have an emergency. Protect me." Boom. Hui, who was still fighting fiercely in the void, suddenly turned into a brilliant and gorgeous golden light and hit the ground behind him, leaving a large golden scorched crack. He held a big shield and a huge sword, turned back and showed a brilliant smile. Well said. Don't worry about anything. I'm right here, behind you. Yin Nuoxing nodded and took a deep breath. His consciousness spread toward the weak and weak consciousness. When his consciousness spread, he felt that another gentle consciousness had also followed and merged with him. It was the little angel. She had also sensed the movement and followed. Together, they came into contact with the weak consciousness. The picture that came into his mind was the scene of countless worlds being destroyed and the void being broken. That was the consciousness in the consciousness, not the consciousness of the it that they came into contact with. This scene was inherited from the consciousness and memory fragments of another thing. It might be the memory and memory fragments of the heavenly god of the origin that was a spare part. Chaos, death, darkness, destruction, these factors together formed a vast and boundless image. For it was an image that kept echoing, repeating, and brainwashing in its mind every day. It was blank, but it would gradually be dyed gray by these things, stained with the blackness of death and emptiness of nothingness. Yin Nuoxing looked at the scene in front of him that was constantly changing from gray to gray. It was as if he was standing in a place where clouds and rain clouds mixed. What came in front of him was a cloud of mist. He looked down and found that his body was shining with golden light. He clenched his hands and then looked up to the front. "This is your consciousness world?" There was no response. Yin Nuoxing could not help but frown, just as he had a lot of guesses in his mind, such as falling into a trap, or curiosity really killed the cat, or, at this time, the clouds and mist in front of him suddenly surged and swirled around them like a whirlwind. Yin Nuoxing was stunned. Before he could understand, the little angel suddenly said, "This cloud and mist is its unformed consciousness." Unformed consciousness? Yin Nuoxing came to his senses and felt a little surprised. The consciousness itself had not even been born. Even the concept of consciousness had not been completely formed. It could already send out a weak signal to them. How strong must its desire to survive be to guide this signal to them through this distance? "Do you want us to take you out?" Yin Nuoxing frowned and asked again. But just like before, there was no sound at all. He could only see the cloud and mist surging, as if it was answering him. But the problem was that he could not understand what it meant at all. A cloud was surging and rolling there. How could he guess its meaning? He shook his head helplessly. It seemed that he could only find the answer himself. Yin Nuoxing waved his hand and pushed the cloud and mist aside. He looked outside and then couldn't help but be stunned. Outside the cloud and mist was the gray and dark scene that they saw when they first came in. It was full of chaos, death, ruin, and destruction. It was like a huge spherical image that surrounded this area. Yin Nuoxing turned to look at the sphere-shaped space. He was silent for a while. He felt that if he used these scenes to replay in front of him all day long, sooner or later, he would also go crazy, not to mention a initial consciousness in a chaotic state. Just as he was observing the scenes of destruction and trying to distinguish where the images that were mixed with consciousness and memory fragments were, the cloud and mist suddenly trembled and shrank in size. It wriggled slowly, as if it wanted to shrink into a ball and hide. The commotion here woke Yin Nuoxing up, making him realize that it was not the time to relax and do research. He hurriedly sent a message to the little angel in his soul. What do you think of the initial chaotic consciousness? Does this thing count as one of your kind? The little angel was silent for a while. She did not nod or shake her head. It's hard to tell. It's still too young and has not formed a consciousness. Even the concept of thing has not been completely formed. It's hard to say if it is or not. Our birthplaces are a little similar. Yin Nuoxing was silent. He furrowed his brows tightly and looked at the cloud. A blank consciousness, a chaotic consciousness. Order has yet to be divided. Nothing has been fixed. Perhaps it can know something. At least it can control it now. The little angel smiled softly. She already knew what he would choose. She nodded slightly. Well, I'll listen to you. I have a way to protect its chaotic consciousness. You can open the shell that imprisons it, and we can bring it out. When the time comes, Yin Nuoxing wanted to say how to settle it down. But before he could say anything, the little angel already knew what he meant. The birthplaces are the same. Then I have a way to create the same environment for it. Don't worry. After the discussion, the little angel controlled the power of consciousness to spread out from Yin Nuoxing's body and enveloped the cloud of chaos. Yin Nuoxing grabbed them, and his consciousness quickly returned to his body. As soon as he opened his eyes, the dark earth became more unstable. He had just controlled most of the energy, but there was no way to stop the part that was implicated and detonated. At this moment, there were continuous energy runes appearing and being destroyed. One after another, the energy explosions spread rapidly along a straight line. The bright white energy of order and the dark red elements of nirvana were fighting inside it, wantonly destroying, smashing, and burning. This unsightly creation of twisted rules was beyond recognition in just a minute. Yin Nuo Star controlled the guiding energy and let it explode along a core area, wrapping the core in the center. The outer part was bombarded in one direction and began to destroy its thick outer shell. The energy turbulence made Hui, who was guarding here, clearly feel that there was a destructive energy surging below. How are you? Are you okay? Yin Nuoxing took the time to ask. Oh, I'm fine. Hui nodded. He took a closer look and saw that he was holding a shield. Even his great sword had been put away. He pointed to the front and said, "They are not moving. If something still happens in this situation, then something is really wrong." Yin Nuoxing was puzzled when he heard that. He turned around to take a look. Those large pieces of manifestations were like puppets with their strings cut. They were frozen in the void, maintaining their last movement without moving. He thought for a moment. It was probably because of the destruction of this creation of the twisted rules. It was as if the manifestation that wanted to ambush him had suddenly disappeared. The backup plan that the underworld left behind is probably attached to this core. Once the core is destroyed, the manifestations will also quickly lose control and turn back into energy. Let's not talk about this anymore. Prepare to retreat. Let's go. The earth trembled violently, and a huge crack appeared. Looking from afar, the crack looked like a ferocious smile. The big mouth spat out a ball of pure white light and violent energy that had nowhere to be released. After a violent explosion of energy that shook the void, the entire creation of twisted rules was torn apart and disintegrated from the inside out. From afar, it looked like a big fireball that had exploded and spewed out dozens of flames. It spewed those flames outwards, and the outer layer began to collapse inwards. Those dumbfounded abyssal death mist manifestations gradually turned back into energy and surged towards the fireball that had become dry and deflated. Following a series of fine but bright energy flashes, the entire fireball expanded violently and released a wave of energy that was not very powerful. After that, it collapsed towards the center in a millisecond and finally disappeared completely. There was nothing left in the void. It seems that after the core is destroyed, those defensive manifestations will also disappear. We scratched his head. It's just that the way that thing exploded was a little weird. It looked like it had collapsed. There was no movement. Although it had bought them some time, the result was still very good. We did not rush to ask him what he had just done. After Yin Nuoxing confirmed the state of the little angel and the light of chaotic consciousness, he waved his hand. 10 minutes. We have something to do this time. Let's hurry to the next place and do as much damage as we can while we still have time. We laughed. The Void Demolition Office is open for business. Yin Nuoxing and the little girl were speechless. What should they do if they suddenly did not want to acknowledge this guy? Before Yin Nuoxing could lament that someone had become a little reckless after ascending to the primeval tier and needed to be taught a lesson, the two of them felt a violent movement as if the stars had exploded. Oh, I've mentioned it before. When their eyes fixed again, they had already gone directly above another creation of twisted rules. In a short moment, they had gone to another place, and the one before them was even bigger. Let's do it as usual, Foam. I'll attract their firepower. You can destroy their home, and then there's no need to fight. Hui patted Yin Nuoxing's shoulder and dove down towards the shield and the greatsword. A voice that contained the power of rules exploded in the void. Bastard! Come bite me. Boom! The enemy's reaction was very violent. As soon as he, the luminous firefly, appeared, that group of, the creation of twisted rules that resembled a molten volcano went berserk. A weave of manifestations came out in a frenzy and attacked without any time to gather or prepare. They lunged at Hui fiercely with ferocity. Then, a group of dregs was crushed into a pile of exploding dregs by a fellow who had just ascended to the primeval tier and was itching for a fight. Or he simply threw them out like bowling balls, shattering the army of manifestations while he was at it. In short, the situation became very chaotic in an instant. Yin Nuoxing rolled her eyes. Wielding the Netherworld Ruin's sword, she slammed it into the crater of the molten volcano like a meteor crashing into the ground. Her sword carried the power of creation that could split heaven and earth as it plunged into the entire creation of twisted rules. Using the same method, she let the energy spread rapidly, guided it, and detonated it. Then a strand of her soul and spiritual power waiting for a signal that it might send out. However, the second creation of the twisted rules did not seem to have a particularly strong desire to survive, or perhaps it had not even been born with a chaotic consciousness. Anyway, when he demolished their home did not react at all and was easily smashed into pieces by him. The sound of the explosion was comparable to the sound of the creation of the world. It was so bright and dazzling that Hui felt that his corium gold dog eyes were going blind. It did not take much time to get rid of the second creation of twisted rules. Soon, they came to the third place. After destroying the entire void, it was followed by the fifth, the sixth. After the three of them had destroyed almost 40 creations of twisted rules in the underworld without stopping, Yin Nuoxing felt that her condition had dropped a little. However, it was still fine for now. It was just that they seemed to have gone very far into this space. There was still some time left. A part of the sins of order that had accumulated in the void had dissipated. It was not much, but about 1/20th of that part had solidified and settled in the conceptual layer of rules. As the little girl spoke, she noticed Yin Nuoxing's unpleasant expression and explained, "That is something that cannot be avoided. It caused serious damage to the void and the conceptual layer of rules. It is like stabbing a knife into the ground. Even if the knife was pulled out, there would still be a scar left. If it was stabbed into a person's body, even if the person recovered, there would still be memories left. That 1/20th is such a part." Yin Nuoxing sighed softly. He had expected that they would not be able to get rid of it completely. It was just that when the results were announced, well, he was a little conflicted. How many have we destroyed? How much time do we have? Should we continue? Hui was still thinking about what the demolition office had said, so the first thing he asked was to demolish. It is less than an hour since the first barrier dissipated, the little girl said. She looked at the empty space and said, "Let's take a break first. It is not too late to decide later." Yin Nuoxing raised both of his hands in agreement. He sat down in the void and relaxed. This kind of high-precision demolition work was very difficult for him. He wanted to do it openly and directly blow up a part of the void or something. However, that kind of method would work on things that were densely packed together. These creations of twisted rules were scattered all over the void. Moreover, if he did something big here, he was afraid that he would be surrounded by a group of people from the underworld in the next second. Although he had 36 worlds, although he had become even more insane and ridiculously powerful after 100 million years, he was only at the peak of the origin. Even if his energy was limitless, his spirit and soul would still be tired. Even if he used a sword to cut people, there would be times when his hands would feel weak. The primeval. Yin Nuoxing sighed deeply. Are you free? If you are, shouldn't you think about the path of the primeval? Staying in the origin realm did not seem to be a solution. Chapter 1485. When another huge creation of distorted rules was ignited like fireworks, it caused a series of huge explosions in the void. Yin Nuoxing finally heaved a sigh of relief in front of the two of them. Just as his body swayed, he was caught by Hui from the side. Hey, are you okay? Hui quickly held on to Yin Nuoxing, who looked a little weak. Then, he suddenly felt that something was wrong. How could an energy life form appear so weak? At most, his light would be dim and his body would be transparent. But now he looked completely weak. Didn't you say that you shouldn't force yourself? Why are you still so reckless? If you can't do it, you should have said it earlier. Weak? Yin Nuoxing stood up with difficulty. At this moment, he felt a little tired. It was as if there was a void on his shoulders. It was so heavy that it made it difficult for him to breathe. I'm shocked. How many years has it been since I felt like this? Can an energy life form feel tired? The little girl walked forward and placed her hand on Yin Nuoxing's chest. She frowned slightly. The power of order, and order has been used up too much. I didn't think of this. To deal with a distorted law creation, we need to use the same amount of power to deal with it. Hui immediately understood. Maple was now weak because he had used up too much power of order and order. It just so happened that the power of order in this place was a little weak. The two conditions were a little too much for him to bear. Why is it so troublesome to clean up? Yin Nuoxing rolled his eyes. Just as he was about to say something, there was a faint golden light in his body that fused into his soul. He immediately recovered. In this situation, only his little angel could support him like this. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart. My wife is still the most considerate. The little angel was stunned. Her face turned red. Yin Nuoxing coughed. Well, it's not something that can't be admitted. Well, it's not good to say such things in this situation. Looking at the lifeless guy suddenly glowing, Hui and the little girl were stunned. Hui reacted in less than a second. He looked at Yin Nuoxing meaningfully. He also knew that it was not good to say such things in this situation. So, he changed the topic. Well, our Lord Observer seems to want to hold on for a little longer. Shall we continue to the next place? Yin Nuoxing let out a long sigh. How much time do we have? 20 minutes. The little girl's eyes flashed with a faint grayish-blue light. The results are already very good. If we continue, there will be some risks. Seal those places one by one. If they can sense that we've lost those places, they will also react. Yin Nuoxing twirled a strand of her hair as if she was thinking. After a moment, she looked up at Hui and said, Hui, give her a strand of your order power. I have an idea. Hey. Hui sensed something bad from his deep gaze and instantly jumped a few steps back. I'm telling you, this place isn't the world of order. We're in the enemy's base camp. Please don't let your imagination run wild. Otherwise, if something really happens, we'll die here. The world of order will be finished. We saw that Yun Nuoxing's eyes were getting brighter and brighter. He knew that he probably couldn't hold this guy down anymore. The bitterness in his heart gushed out like a spring. My teammates' strange ideas are even more confusing than the black hole of nothingness. God knows what he thought of in this 1 minute. Anyway, it doesn't feel good. He needs to hold it down. No, this guy can't hold it down anymore at this stage. Hui sighed and began to gather his energy. He then handed it to the little girl. She looked up at Yin Nuoxing. Then, what do you want me to do? Leave a void beacon for us to escape. The location will be set at the world of order. Any place will do. As long as the primeval god can't stop us, it will be fine. The little girl's gaze gradually became strange. She tilted her head and threw a questioning look at Hui. The latter scratched his head, but could not figure out what Yin Nuoxing was thinking. He nodded. Deal with the void beacon first. I'll help you. Yin Nuoxing smiled and reached out to let go of the strand of hair. He did not do it on a whim. He suddenly noticed something and wanted to take a look. They had destroyed 70 or 80 of those creations of the law of distortion, but there were very few of them that had chaotic consciousness. So far, he had only caught a handful, 3. There should have been 4, but the last one was now dormant. It was still too fragile, much more fragile than the other 3. He let the little angel help to stabilize it, but he did not know how long it would take for it to recover. At least for now, it would not be of any use. The 3 chaotic consciousness had a common point, a very vague message. They pointed to a place in the depths of the void. There seemed to be something there that resonated with them. Yin Nuoxing guessed that it might be a mature, abyssal death mist life form like the little angel. However, the latter did not seem to feel much. There was no consciousness connection in its heart like the origin space. Perhaps it was not fully formed yet. Perhaps he was not too sure, so he wanted to go and take a look. In short, he had sensed such a strange thing. Now he wanted to go and have a look. He did not know how long this trip would take. At least, he felt that 20 minutes was not enough. Now he needed to have a backup plan so that they could retreat safely. He had to guard against the group of people from the underworld according to the standard of guarding against the primeval god of the beginning. If they found that the thing they worked so hard to make was destroyed, a group of furious primeval gods might come after them. At that time, it would be difficult to escape even if they wanted to. It's done. Shouldn't you tell me what you want to do? Hui patted Yin Nuoxing to wake him up. During the time when he was distracted, he and the little girl looked at Yin Nuoxing. Yin Nuoxing looked into the depths of the void and said, "We have to go deeper. Maybe we have to go to the lower plane. We have to go to a place where there may be something hidden. It probably has something to do with the underworld." What kind of strange creation is this? Hui crossed his arms and frowned slightly. Foam, I suddenly thought of something. You see, the distorted clan and the underworld are keen on creating these strange creations. The tide of chaos and the tide of darkness are just one of them. The distorted clan has also created strange life forms. The underworld is even more outrageous. They have distorted the normal rules of order into this form and created something unknown. And these creations are more or less related to themselves. The distorted clan's creations are related to their own power. What about the underworld's creations are related to them? Yin Nuoxing pointed in the direction and said. The little girl was about to teleport in the direction that Hui pointed. She suddenly had an idea. She looked up and said, "The abyssal death mist life form? I heard you say that it's a special life form that doesn't show the characteristics of chaos, right?" Yin Nuoxing thought about the state of the little angel. When he first met her at the bottom of the black hole, he did not feel the slightest trace of chaos from her. He just judged that she belonged to another level of order based on her birthplace. And now, her state was no different from the ordinary life forms of order. Yes, the little girl frowned and thought for a moment. After a while, she looked at the curious eyes of the two and shook her head. No, I just thought of something. Is the direction you're pointing to okay? There's only one thing worth paying attention to in that direction. I've decided to go there from the beginning. It's just that the non-order nature there is too strong, so I didn't directly teleport there. She looked at Yin Nuoxing and finally confirmed. The accumulated sins of the world there. Yes, That place is fused with the sins of order and the shadow of order. They have become the accumulation of sins of the world before sinking into the conceptual level of the void. Are you sure you want to go there? Yin Nuashing pressed on his chest and confirmed that the energy rune she gave him was still in effect. He nodded without hesitation. As long as you can guarantee that the void beacon can get us out of there safely, we'll go. The first seal will be lifted in 12 minutes. The little girl reached out and grabbed Yin Nuashing and Hui. She whispered, I hope you've calculated everything. Good luck to us. This time, the teleportation across the abyssal death shroud might be, because the distance was longer. Even their senses felt completely different from before. It was as if they were being pulled from the sky to the ground by a rope. Then, they passed through a layer of ocean, a layer of viscous magma, and crashed into the void. In the end, they even rolled tens of thousands of times in the chaotic void. Their senses felt as if they had gone through a long journey of 10,000 years. After that, everything suddenly returned to normal. There's someone. I'll seal the void first. I'll leave the rest to you two. Yin Nuashing and Hui quickly recovered from the chaotic reaction and raised their state to the peak. When they felt as if they had been fished out of the water, the line of sight in front of them suddenly opened up, and a lot of things crashed into their eyes. They were out of the state of void transmission. In the void, a dazzling light was wrapped in the thick abyssal death shroud. That place was like a sun releasing a lonely light. It was also a creation of distorted rules. It no longer had its ugly appearance. It was probably all melted. Now it at least looked very pure. A cluster of light and a cluster of black mist. Dark red energy swept across like thunder. It was just like when the world was first born and the nebula gathered. Looking at it this way, it really looked like a newborn quasar that had reached a very critical moment in its formation. In this lonely place of nothingness, two figures wrapped in black shrouds stood. They had their hands behind their backs as they looked at the bright spot that could illuminate the void. Their black eyes flashed with dark red light from time to time. If one looked carefully, one of them was completely hidden in the black shroud, while the other had half of his body exposed to the void. I say, are we just going to watch like this? The man who was completely hidden in the black shroud said softly, aren't we here to check? Let's go to the next place. There's still a lot of work to do. The other tall man turned his head and glanced at him. His eyelids drooped slightly. The cradle of the carrier has been completely formed. Our inspection methods in the past are useless, and there's no way to use them on it. You're right. We can only watch and judge with our eyes. We can't disturb its peace. The man in the black shroud let out an unwilling sound. The shroud rolled a little. He looked away and said, then you stay here and watch. I'll go check out the other places. I'm going to get tired of waiting like this. The tall man glared at him and said, stand still. The black shroud shuddered. Just as he was about to do something, he suddenly stopped. The tall man said in a low voice, don't tell me you've forgotten how Qing-Chi went missing. What? Didn't that guy wander off somewhere and get killed by some dangerous place in a void? I'm not an idiot. It's not like I'm going to weird places. The man in the black shroud muttered nonchalantly, you're his partner. You should know that guy better than any of us. He always likes to wander off to weird places. His interests are strange, and his thoughts are strange. Or, do you think there's someone in the void who can kill us? The man glanced at him. His irritable expression slowly receded. He took a deep breath and looked forward. Then he calmly said, only people of your generation would believe such a lousy reason. Fledgling. Hey, don't call me that. I'm not the same as the rest of them. Before you can complete the mission on your own, you're still a fledgling. The two glared at each other fiercely. The weak aura that leaked out caused the void to tremble slightly. After a moment, the man in the black shroud muttered and looked away. He floated to the side in a fit of pique. The man glanced at him and could not help but sigh softly. A new generation. Newborn calves are not afraid of tigers. They have grown stronger under the stimulation of the new power, but their brains have not grown. He frowned at the man in a fit of pique. Just as he was about to walk up and talk to him about the principles of the void, a message suddenly flashed in his mind. causing his gaze to tremble. Beihao, the aura of the Middle Plains node and cradle has been lost. Go check it out quickly. Node and cradle lost? The man named Beihao widened his eyes. He raised his hand and grabbed the man in the black shroud, wanting to leave. Fledgling, let's go. We have a new mission to deal with. If you call me Fledgling again, I'll... The black shroud became irritable. The man in the black shroud had just protested when he was glared at by a pair of eyes that contained a terrifying aura. The black shroud that had just rolled over and over immediately quietened down. He weakly muttered, I'll leave then. In a few more years. Beihao snorted softly. Just as he was about to leave the void with him, his spirit trembled violently. He turned his head abruptly, and a bad feeling arose in his heart. Ever since he turned around and said goodbye to Qing Chi for the last time, he felt that his spirit had become a little strange. It became more and more strange as the years passed. Just like now, his eyes could not see anything. The fledgling in his hand also did not move, but he felt that something was wrong. North knows. Let's go quickly. What are you waiting for? Didn't you say you were going to check out the situation in the Middle Plain? The man in the black shroud seemed to be unhappy with being called fledgling. He could not help but retort. Just as he was about to open the void to teleport, he saw Beihao suddenly explode with an aura and enter battle mode. He was shocked. Hey, I only shouted once. Can't you afford to play? However, he soon realized that Beihao's aura was not directed at him. Instead, it was released toward the part of the void. He could not be any more stunned. What was the meaning of this? The next second, he knew what had happened. A huge grayish-blue shroud suddenly appeared in a corner of the void. Then, a huge spherical grayish-blue barrier enveloped the area in an instant. He instantly felt that he had lost contact with other places. He also lost control of the void. What? Fledgling, do you want to die? Get out of the way. Before the man in the black shroud could react, Beihao roared. He swung his strong arm and threw the man and the shroud away. In the next second, the energy in his hand surged and condensed into a huge sword with a ghost head. It collided fiercely with a huge golden sword that appeared out of nowhere. He was caught off guard by the sudden attack. His body was sent flying far away. He had just adjusted his state of mind when he felt that he was dragged into a golden domain. His divinity, spirit, and divine right were all suppressed. He only had time to think of the words powerful enemy. Then, he turned around and fought the enemy that he did not even see. Just as the person in the black fog reacted, he was shaken by a circle of golden energy. Like a gourd, he rolled dozens of times in the void before coming to a stop. He said in an unfriendly tone, What are you doing? Why are you suddenly? Who is it? He suddenly felt that something was wrong. He turned his head. He did not know when a bright white figure had appeared thousands of feet away from him. A pair of pure white eyes stared straight at him, looking him up and down. Then, a soft voice came into his mind, making him feel like his lungs were about to explode. A fledgling in the primeval realm? Interesting. The man in the black shroud was so angry that his teeth almost broke. The shroud around him surged, contracted, and stretched in one direction. The person who had been hiding in the shroud was also revealed. It was a young man who looked less than 20 years old. The shroud of shimmering crimson light turned into a huge cloak that was flung behind him. His face still looked very young, and there were not many traces of time on his body. Just a peak-level origin. The black shroud. Oh, the young man roared violently. Countless energy runes condensed from the abyssal death shroud appeared around him. The formation looked similar to Yin Nuoxing's formation, but did not have the impact. He rushed towards Yin Nuoxing. I hate it when people call me a fledgling. Yin Nuoxing took a step forward. In the space around her, hundreds of millions of magic formations appeared. Then, they overlapped and gathered together. Then the whole body split, duplicated, and overlapped again. This process repeated hundreds of times in an instant. Countless magic formations suddenly lit up with dazzling light. A huge amount of order energy suddenly gathered, and the young man's expression changed drastically. Boom! Dazzling white energy surged out from every single formation. The layers of energy were so powerful that they seemed to be able to shatter the void. The young man felt as if a meteor had condensed the entire void and was crashing down on him. The attack that he had hurriedly unleashed was far too weak in the face of this power. He couldn't even put up a fight before he was sent flying. Yin Nuoxing clapped her hands lightly. When did the underworld have such a young primeval god like you? Well, such a weak primeval god. Yin Nuoxing's lips curled into an extremely strange smile. She suddenly had a new idea. She lightly stomped her feet, and hundreds of millions of magic formations surrounded the young man who was flying backward. Fledgling, come here and play with me. The young man pathetically stabilized himself and wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. He was so angry that his whole body was trembling. A vein popped out on his forehead. Countless energy runes of the abyssal death shroud appeared and condensed into a long spear. He looked at the magic formations that surrounded him and suddenly rushed out. I told you, don't call me a fledgling. Chapter 1486. Yin Nuoxing did not expect that there were two enemies at the teleportation point. He had met one of them before. At that time, that guy was checking something with the tall man. He did not expect to see him again when he went deep into the enemy's camp. The person beside him was also different. What surprised Yin Nuoxing even more was that his new partner was such a young premier who used the power of the abyssal death mist. Perhaps it was some kind of catalytic effect. When he fought with that guy last time, the latter did not use the power of the abyssal death mist to fight. They could command and control the abyssal death mist, and they seemed to keep a distance from on purpose. Just like the tall man, he used his own power, which also had the characteristics of chaos. It had nothing to do with the abyssal death mist. This aroused Yin Nuoxing's interest in another aspect. The two of them could not recognize who they were at the moment. There was a layer of distorting power on them that prevented them from recognizing. Yin Nuoxing happened to have an interesting idea in this situation. Let's not talk about the tall man first. This fledgling in front of him probably had something to do with the underworld. If he could capture it alive and study it, he might be able to find out a lot of things. Although it was a young premier who was catalyzed by a special method, it was still in the premier realm. If it could come out with a real premier realm person, it was unknown what it was doing out there, but it should know a lot of things. After thinking about it for a while, Yin Nuoxing's eyes suddenly became a little more energetic. In the short time he was distracted, the fledgling had launched countless attacks on him. Although it was a catalyzed premier realm, it was still linked to that realm. The power of attack, divinity, law, and order would still be improved. However, it was not difficult to get rid of this fledgling. After all, it was not as genuine as that guy. Boom! Several blended energy shockwaves flashed in front of Yin Nuoxing with dazzling light. Yin Nuoxing turned his body to the side, and a magic circle behind him flashed with the light of energy. Using the same level of energy, he fought back. The two energies exploded with an unprecedentedly strong energy radiance and shockwaves tens of thousands of feet away. The energy of order and non-order were fighting in the void, and it could easily cause great damage to the void and the void. The void in front of Yin Nuoxing had already exploded, like a board that was torn into pieces by brute force and arranged in a disorderly manner. Suddenly, a figure broke through the area of energy flashes and rushed towards him with a rune spear. Yin Nuoxing casually picked up the Netherworld Ruin Sword. Suddenly, he felt that it was not a good idea. If he was not careful and the fledgling in front of him ran away, he would not be able to stop it. After thinking about it, he put down the Netherworld Ruin Sword. The order energy condensed into a bright white energy sword in his hand, and various circles shone on him. He picked up the sword and met the fledgling head-on. A series of metallic clangs rang out in the void, echoing with the laws of the universe. The impact of energy recklessly spilled out into the void, destroying the space. Countless afterimages of spears and swords clashing could be seen around the two of them. The two of them could not even count how many attacks they had made in a single second. Yin Nuashing stared at the young face and suddenly laughed softly. A voice entered the young man's mind. Fledgling, is this all you've got? Can this be considered? You want your stage? Countless afterimages were instantly wiped out as a purplish-black light entered the battlefield. Yin Nuashing pressed the nether void sword and the sword of order together with both hands, and slashed with all his might, smashing the person in front of him and the entire void into the void. He took a few steps back, and the magic circle behind him began to operate again. Even in the fierce battle, just now, he did not let the magic circle disappear. He had tens of thousands of chances to push the person in front of him into the void for a bath. However, he wanted to capture him alive, and at the same time, study the combat power of this new thing, so he had to pretend to be weak. His vision suddenly became a little blurry. The black and red mirror image flashed with his vision. Yin Nuashing suddenly saw thick black smoke spewing out of the void that he had smashed open. The crimson shadow condensed into several huge ghosts and roared as they squeezed out of the void. The smoke quickly engulfed him and the void behind him. Just as he focused on the ghosts, his feet suddenly trembled. He looked down and found that he was standing on the ground of a collapsed planet. Yin Nuashing was stunned for a moment. Scene change? Illusion? Illusion? It did not seem to be either. Was it some kind of boundary? But the scene in front of him did not feel like that. The scene was still being perfected. He appeared in an illusory starry sky, surrounded by a huge abyssal death mist storm. In the eye of the storm, there were 6 huge crimson stars, and the shattered planet he was on was surrounded by these crimson stars. The energy radiating from all directions made him feel a sense of danger. He was afraid that the other party had used all the power he could muster. Feng, be careful. The divine right domain of the Yuanshe realm is physical. It is like the scene has changed. Those are not illusions. They are all real existences that can affect the space of the real world. They are real existences that the spirit, soul, and divine right have distorted the rules of the void and projected into the real world. Huey's voice appeared in his mind in time. Yin Nuashing was stunned. Huh, divine right domain. I used the divine right domain to shroud him first. Why is it his turn to use the divine right domain? My theocracy domain didn't receive any feedback either. The suppression effect of the Yuanshe realm. Although I can see that there is something wrong with the kid, he is still a real Yuanshe. Let's not talk about it. I have to deal with this guy first. It is a bit difficult. Huey's voice became more hurried as he spoke. There were sounds of fighting coming from the other side. If you can't deal with it, just hold on for a while. I will deal with this side first. Yin Nuashing's cheeks twitched a little. Suppression effect? The suppression effect of a higher heavenly god against a lower heavenly god. The reason why Qing Shi was unable to unleash his materialized divine right domain that day was probably because he was suppressed by the domain of the gods that came with his divinity carrier. If Qing Shi had unleashed his divine right domain that day, the result would not have been unexpected. As soon as his mind wandered, Yin Nuashing felt something happening in all directions. The energy in the divine right domain grew explosively. The broken planet under his feet was under an invisible energy pressure. Like a sand castle, large pieces of sand fell from the cliffs and fell into the core of the broken planet along the central rift valley. The planet was being cut in half from the middle. The energy that made the planet tremble was also pressuring Yin Nuashing. He vaguely saw the stars that surrounded the planet and the abyssal death shroud gathering towards the center as if they were going to press down on him. Yin Nuashing held the nether void sword, and the magic circles multiplied in size. He pointed them in all directions at the crimson stars and the abyssal death shroud. A few seconds later, he stabbed the nether void sword into the broken planet. The violent energy of order spread out like a storm with him as the center. All the magic circles went berserk at the same time, bursting with the same amount of energy storm. In an instant, the divine right domain was shaken, and almost everything in the physical divine right domain was swept clean. When the last wind blew across the stars, Yin Nuashing pulled the nether void sword out. The abyssal death shroud and the 6 suns had all disappeared, and the broken planet was only left with a 3-meter square ground under his feet. So, are you going to keep hiding? Yin Nuashing casually flicked the nether void sword with his finger. I take back what I said earlier. It doesn't seem right to call you a fledgling. Casually waving the nether void sword, Yin Nuashing's eyes seemed to wander aimlessly around the stars, but his attention was always on one spot. You're like an idiot, squandering the power that came out of nowhere. I guess you're not even a heavenly god before you were forced to ascend, right? Suddenly, there was a ripple in the spot where his attention was focused. The energy that surrounded the divine right domain suddenly gathered and condensed into the figure of a young man. Since the young man had taken the initiative to appear, Howren did not have to pretend to look for him. He turned around and looked at the young man, not hiding anymore. The young man narrowed his eyes, his face cold and indifferent. Now he looked much calmer than before. Only now did he reveal the temperament of a high heavenly god. Of course, it might have something to do with the fact that he was brutally defeated right after he used his trump card. Yin Nuashing did not know the characteristics of the divine right domain of the primeval realm, and he did not need to know. After all, the things that should and should not be in this domain were all destroyed in the impact of the storm. Unless the young man could restore it again, or use other means to maintain the domain, there was no other way. During this process, his divine right domain was also in an active state, like an array within an array, protecting him and reducing the impact of the physical domain on him. After the young man appeared in the physical divine right domain, the stars suddenly surged again. Just as Yin Nuashing was paying attention, he saw the power of the abyssal death shroud spreading out from the space behind the young man. It was not the storm, nor the suns. It seemed that the destroyed things were only a one-time projection, or the young man himself did not know how to use it. At least for now, the domain had recovered some power. Who are you? The young man narrowed his eyes and looked coldly at Yin Nuashing. There doesn't seem to be someone like you in the world of order. You want to know? Yin Nuashing looked up and laughed softly. He raised the Netherworld Ruins sword and swung it to the side, cutting a crimson monster that appeared out of thin air into ashes. If you want to know, use all your skills and defeat me. Maybe I will tell you when I am in a good mood. But don't embarrass yourself with such sneaky tricks. You know they are useless. The young man was silent. His cold eyes scanned Yin Nuashing's body and the highly distorted space around him. His eyes became serious. That was the distortion caused by the divine right domain and some other energies condensed to a certain extent, causing some pressure on the void. Unimaginable and unpredictable energy rippled around him, and his divine right domain had not dissipated yet. The young man lowered his head and suddenly jumped back. Just as Yin Nuashing was about to follow him, the former suddenly threw out an entire abyssal death mist. The few distorted monsters just now surged out of the abyssal death mist. Millions of energy vortexes appeared in the abyssal death mist, pouring an immeasurable amount of chaotic energy at him. It was like an energy curtain was pushing towards him, and its power was several times stronger than when he was fighting with him at the beginning. Before he could put down the Netherworld Ruins sword, Yin Nuashing simply swung the sword in front of him without any fancy moves. A huge purplish-black sword ray wrapped in the energy of order burst out and swept the entire energy curtain clean. He was about to follow up, but in just a short moment, another energy curtain exploded towards him. And out of the few monsters that were released at the beginning, one of them had been hiding until now. Yin Nuashing snorted softly, and the magic formation behind him exploded with endless energy. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Even the primeval heavenly gods could not show off their energy attacks in front of him. What do you think you're going to hide? The power of countless magic formations burst out at full force, shaking this divine right domain in an instant. Yin Nuashing burst out with a bright white light, and with the Netherworld Ruins sword circling around him, he used this life as a sword and pierced through the crimson monsters that were rushing towards him. He found the young man's direction and was about to rush over when the void in front of him suddenly collapsed, and a cloud of abyssal death mist burst out and pasted his face. Yin Nuashing smacked his lips in annoyance as he swept away the abyssal death mist coiling around him with a slash of his sword. Being controlled by someone else's domain meant that he had to face such a situation. Even if his own divine right domain could offset part of the enemy's abyssal domain's influence on him, he was still in someone else's divine right domain. Before he could break free and shatter the domain, he would have to endure the indiscriminate bombardment from the entire domain. Energy blasts ruled blasts, any attack at will, and even a crumbling void smashing on his face. His attacks would also be weakened by the enemy's divine right domain, and this predicament would continue until he crushed the enemy in the void. Yin Nuashing's lips curled into a strange smile. In terms of energy, capacity, and so on, this fledgling in front of him was no match for him. Since the fledgling wanted to toy with him and exhaust him to death, then he would let the fledgling exhaust him. Let's see who would exhaust who in the end. Yin Nuashing sighed. With a wave of his hand, the number of magic circles increased by several times. Then, without any accuracy, they poured out storm-like energy attacks in all directions. Using only one magic circle to deal with the attack from the teenager in front of him, there was no empty space in this starry sky and domain. The teenager still had to divide his attention to suppress this domain that was constantly being attacked and constantly shaking. He also had to deal with Yin Nuashing, who appeared in front of him like a ghost with a large group of magic circles. Yin Nuashing rushed forward. After a hasty exchange of weapons and an energy explosion, the teenager hurriedly retreated. Then, Yin Nuashing rushed forward and slapped him in the face. The two of them, one running and one running, had brought this theocracy domain far away. Hui and Bei Hao, who were outside, saw that they were wrapped in a ball of light of the theocracy domain. They were a little stunned. They were very curious about what was going on inside, and who was chasing who. Very strange thoughts suddenly appeared. Bei Hao thought that the fledgling was being chased and crushed by another enemy whose strength and identity were unknown, but who was probably in the Yuansha realm. Hui was so nervous that he thought that Yin Nuashing's strength had not recovered yet, and was being chased around the void by the enemy in the Yuansha realm. The strange thoughts resonated at this moment. Hui and Bei Hao looked at each other. In the next second, the two of them tangled together like crazy. You punch me, I kick you back. Every punch was on the flesh. Every move was more vicious than the previous one. Things like eye poking, groin kicking, 1,000 years. They used everything they could. It did not look like a fight between two people in the Yuansha realm. There was no elegance to speak of. Yin Nuashing did not know how much energy a person in the Yuansha realm could hold. That young man looked like he had just entered the Yuansha realm. At this realm, he definitely could not compare with a special type like him. As for his energy capacity, well, he did not know either. When Chu Hui was still at the peak of the origin, he had helped to measure his energy capacity. Excluding the situation of the 36 worlds, Hui had replied that he was a monster. After calculating it horizontally and vertically, Yin Nuashing felt that his energy capacity should be higher than his opponent's, so he was no longer in a hurry. Both of them were no longer in a hurry at the same time, and tacitly, one chased while the other fled. While running, they were still desperately pouring energy at each other's faces. Yin Nuashing was still calm and composed. He still had various kinds of fighting methods that he had not used, but in order to catch this new thing, he did not plan to kill him, just like a hunter chasing after his prey. As for the young man, he knew very little about the Yuansha realm. He could not guess whether the young man had any trump cards. So far, all the attacks that the young man had made on him could only be regarded as a threat. Even if he stood still and was hit by thousands of cannons, he would only be slightly injured. Therefore, he was not sure whether the young man had other attacking methods. If he did not use them, he was either an idiot like what he said, or he was guarding against his attack and did not make a move. Nothingness. Order of origin. With a sharp energy hum, a bright white energy storm erupted from Yin Nuashing and several huge magic circles. It rushed to the entire starry sky. As the energy storm surged again, the starry sky of this physical realm instantly dimmed a lot. Many cracks appeared on the edge of the starry sky. This time, the cracks did not heal after they appeared. This realm seemed to have reached its limit. Taking advantage of the moment when the realm was turbulent, Yin Nuoxing rushed forward. The netherworld ruins sword pierced through the young man's body with a force that could tear the world apart from the outside. The energy of order and the element of nirvana entangled the young man's body like maggots. Bang! Before Yin Nuoxing could make the next move, he was angrily thrown away by the young man. He slowly stabilized his body in this shattered starry sky. Looking down at the young man whose body had turned into the abyssal death mist, he frowned slightly. The abyssal death mist was also spewing out of the wound in the young man's body, as if he was made of the abyssal death mist. A half-energy, half-material life form. It was not difficult to see through the young man's life form. Yin Nuoxing was just a little surprised. It seemed that the young man was a normal life form before. However, he was probably modified by the abyssal death mist. Because of something, could it be used to deal with the world of order? Yin Nuoxing shook his head helplessly. With the current power of the underworld, it was enough to deal with the world of order. There was no need to do something so superfluous. Either they felt that it was not enough, or they had other plans. He felt that it was the latter. Do you still want to continue? Yin Nuoxing slowly walked forward and stood a few thousand feet away from the young man. At this distance, he could slap the young man in the face in the next second. However, he was not worried at all. The energy in his body was still surging and was not affected. However, the young man was already showing signs of fatigue. That cannot be hidden. Using power obtained from other places is not a wonderful feeling. Especially with your kind of power, you can't even maintain the remaining half of your body. Can you? So what? I can still continue. The young man replied faintly and walked forward. He stood 100 meters away from Yin Nuoxing. The abyssal death mist around him kept surging and condensing into energy runes that were 1,000 feet in size. His body that was full of injuries did not slow him down at all. Moreover, he seemed to be actively turning his body into the abyssal death mist. Now, 2/3 of his body had already turned into the abyssal death mist. You talk a lot of nonsense. Are you scared? Or are you tired? Yin Nuoxing's eyes twitched. Well, he did not understand the situation well. It seemed that he could not say anything now. If it was not for the fact that he wanted to capture the young man alive, he would have crushed the young man to death in the void. It would be better to just beat the young man until he was half dead. That way, the battle could end sooner. Yin Nuoxing let out a long sigh and shook his head. I've said too much. He raised the nether void sword. The magic circles began to change in an orderly manner, forming a huge obscure symbol behind him. The young man's expression suddenly changed. As you wish. Let's continue. Chapter 1487. The crumbling void was torn into shreds by the brute force, and the energy that was left in torrents shuttled back and forth between the void and the void. The divine energy that was tainted with the color of the void had changed into another form, and the faint light illuminated the shattered void, looking exceptionally bleak and miserable. The order and rules of this void had been shattered by the frenzied battle of the four giants. The light of the sun in the distance that seemed to be wrapped in black clouds had dimmed a lot, and its appearance had changed under the turbulence of several energies. It now looked like a pinched persimmon, and might turn into a sea urchin with a long tail after a while. The layer of death mist in the abyss had become much thinner as a result. This battle could not go on forever. They only had 4 hours on Yin Nuo planet. When the time was up, they would be defeated if they did not manage to kill the 2 primeval gods. However, if they wanted to kill the 2 primeval gods in 4 hours, if they were in the realm of the gods, he would have absolute confidence. However, they were in the depths of the void and in the enemy's territory. It was not easy to fight, whether it was his battle or Huey's battle. Half of the time had passed. Yin Nuoxing did not expect that the young man could still hold on for so long when he went all out. The divine right domain of the primeval god was so powerful that it could even be seen as a part of the primeval god's body. In this domain, the young man was in an invincible position. As long as his domain was broken, he would be defeated in a very short time. Fortunately, his opponent was just a fledgling. If he fought with the young man under such circumstances, he would probably be beaten up in the void in a few minutes. Yin Nuoxing waved his hand and used a magic circle to block the young man's attack. The magic circle and energy runes of the two were close range, hundreds of meters away. He did not know how the two energy masters fought each other in close range, but he would not underestimate the young man. After all, the young man was a primeval god. The chains of order burst out from a few small magic circles around the young man like spears. They were stuck half a meter away from the young man and could not move an inch closer. This half meter was an extremely troublesome domain. He had used many methods, including the power of order, the energy of origin, and the elements of extinction to erode this reckless guy and control him. But no matter what he did, he could not break this domain. It seemed to be too early to deal with the young man directly. Instead, he was almost eroded by the death fog of the primeval god's abyss in tens of thousands of close-range clashes. Little star, weaken him a little more. I could feel a threshold. Once that threshold is reached, his abyss death fog will break free from my control. The little angel's voice suddenly sounded in Yin Nuoxing's mind. Yin Nuoxing's eyes narrowed, and he suddenly let go of the Nethervoid sword. A ball of dark red energy gathered in his hand, and he slapped the ball of energy into the young man's domain. A burst of dark red energy exploded behind the young man's domain, sending him flying tens of thousands of feet away. Yin Nuoxing waved his hand, and a series of formations surged out, trapping the young man from countless directions. Myriad creation void, chaos falling stars. The entire void suddenly collapsed under the command attack. It was as if two large hands had wrapped around the region from the outside and squeezed it toward the center. The starlight from the endless worlds crossed the infinity of the void, crossed countless distances, and gathered toward the dark red light along with the collapsing void. The violent energy impact from countless directions pressed Yaya's domain and the void into the void bathhouse for a hot bath. Yin Nuoxing took a deep breath. 6 godly rings slowly rose from behind him and rotated. He released the power of his divinity and godly right to the maximum. The 6 godly rings separated from his back. Each godly ring guarded a position in the void and formed a magic circle. After a moment of delay, they poured endless energy that could collapse the void into the void. Each energy seemed to have the power to disintegrate order, burning a huge hole in the void and the void. Meaningless. Meaningless. None of this is meaningful. A furious voice suddenly exploded in the void. Yin Nuoxing's eyes widened as he stared in shock at a chaotic and blurry figure soaring into the sky from a hole in the void. Billowing abyssal death fog erupted from its body. The young man no longer had a body, and his entire body had turned into abyssal death fog. It let out a roar and charged towards Yin Nuoxing, making him feel as if a sharp spear was pointed at his head. You will also kneel in this void. Kneel to your ass. Yin Nuoxing raised the Nethervoid sword. The power of order and godly right gathered on the giant sword. It carried enough power to break open the void and fiercely clashed with the invisible spear. He originally wanted to knock it away, but he was knocked away by its charge. Suddenly, thousands of spears formed in the chaotic and crazy mist. They all charged toward him. It was as if a storm had opened up and poured down, and the spears were the raindrops. The elements of destruction suddenly surged from his body. The dark red mist took his body and disappeared. Those spears all shot toward the empty void. After losing its target, it was stunned. It suddenly felt a heavy blow to its side. It turned its head and saw Yin Nuoxing emerge from the dark red mist. That extremely dangerous and strange sword knocked on its barrier, causing several huge cracks to appear. A hint of confusion appeared in its eyes, as if it was very confused about how Yun Nuashing disappeared in front of its eyes. The abyssal death mist has devoured your consciousness. With a whip kick, Yun Nuashing sent it flying along with its domain. His figure disappeared into the void like a ghost and returned to the middle of his own array group. He controlled the countless arrays to bombard it with a round of attacks. Do you think that's the power that the void gave you? That's just a dangerous and evil gift. Do you think you can still fight at this moment? Bang! A violent shockwave suddenly exploded in the area surrounded by countless energy flames, sweeping away all the energy. The muddle-headed young man became even crazier. He roared like a wild beast. His divine ring and the abyssal death mist devoured the energy runes he used before. He rushed toward Yinuashing barehanded like a human-shaped monster. His sharp claws easily tore through the countless energy shockwaves that were approaching him. He crashed into the magic circle in front of Yin Nuashing. The light of the magic circle dimmed visibly. Hiss! Die! Die! The violent human-shaped beast at least had a clear human face that could show a twisted expression. The abyssal death mist all over his body was rapidly bursting with crimson energy. It was like the energy sparks that burst out from the body of an energy life form. The energy that burst out in an instant sent Yin Nuashing flying with a claw. Why is this guy getting more and more energetic? Yin Nuashing felt dizzy. He stabilized himself in the void. He was stunned when he realized that his opponent did not chase after him like a lunatic. He turned around and saw that the young man was using his bare hands to destroy his magic circle. His face twitched violently. Seeing this, the little angel could not help but mumble. This guy is just like you when he goes crazy. The more he fights, the crazier he gets. It's not good to keep fighting. Why don't you release the restraints as well? I can probably pull you back. Yin Nuashing. Wait, what do you think I am? Do you think I will go berserk just by pressing the secret button? The little angel thought seriously and nodded seriously. Yin Nuashing was speechless. He wanted to grin, but found that he could not laugh. He had no choice but to rush out again. However, her words reminded him of something. He was not talking about going berserk. He did not have much time left. It had probably been 3 hours since the little girl had sealed off this part of the void. If he continued to stay here and let the enemy escape, although there would not be any consequences, the thing that he wanted to do would have to be put on hold indefinitely. After the previous experience, the underworld would definitely strengthen the defense of this place. It was time to end the battle. However, to kill a heavenly god of primordial beginning who had gone berserk for no reason in this situation, Yin Nuashing suddenly stopped in his charge. He looked at the thing that did not even have a human shape, destroying his last 3 magic circles. He suddenly said, "Then hold on tight to me. I will be back soon." The little angel was stunned for a moment. Then he chuckled and nodded. The violent energy shockwave that tore the magic circles apart spread along his claws to his body. However, it only made the abyssal death mist ripple a little. He roared and opened his mouth to bite the magic circles, tearing them into pieces and dissipating them into energy. His defensive field was being weakened by the resistance of the power of order. However, he did not think that it was a big problem. After all, he did not have any more powerful attacks. Once his magic circles were destroyed, he could only be slaughtered by it. An extremely strange energy that carried a dangerous aura that was enough to wake him up for a moment came from behind. He suddenly stopped what he was doing. He turned around and slammed his huge claws forward, trying to stop the attack, just like how he tore apart the energy shockwave. However, this time, he could not tear apart the energy shockwave that was coming at him. He was in a deadlock with the energy shockwave. After a moment, the black and white energies broke free from his grip and slammed into him. Even if you destroy my magic circles, I still have thousands of magic circles. You are just stopping a small part of the Emperor's forces. The hateful voice pierced through the void and into his mind. The pair of eyes in the mist flashed with anger again. He got up from the void and looked up. He suddenly saw the white figure that was tainted with the darkest energy in the world. An energy that was darker than their own appeared in the void. It was two completely opposite energies, the two energies that stood at the peak of order and chaos. As the heavenly god of primordial beginning, he could clearly feel the abnormality in it. Yin Nuoxing held the hilt of the Nethervoid sword with both hands. The energy of origin and the energy of annihilation spread to the great sword and fused together. He looked up at the figure in front of him. His trembling voice seemed to come from the depths of the void. "Let's end this, fledgling." He suddenly lowered his body and led the abyssal death shroud towards Yin Nuoxing for the last time. With a wave of his hand, Yin Nuoxing made all the magic circles disappear into the void. He raised the Nethervoid sword and met the attack head-on. The final battle between the two masters of energy was resolved with such violence and brute force. There were no fancy energy blasts, only the most direct and barbaric collision. In the blink of an eye, they had exchanged hundreds of thousands of blows. The vibrating energy shattered both the void and the void. The two figures merged like shadows, separated, and clashed again. The void was filled with their afterimages. Yin Nuoxing's protective barrier had shattered dozens of times. There were a few more wounds on his body. The abyssal death shroud on his body was so thin that it could not support his wanton use. His body gradually merged again. When he used up the last of his energy, he would revert to his human form. Bang! Like a shooting star from outer space, one white and one black shooting star collided with a crimson object. A huge magic circle suddenly appeared in front of them. Yin Nuoxing smashed into the magic circle with a speed many times faster than light. The Nethervoid sword pierced through half of his chest and nailed him to the magic circle. The violent energy blasts created a ring-shaped shockwave. Countless cracks appeared on his domain, and it was about to collapse. "It's over." Yin Nuoxing took a deep breath. The two powers of order merged in his eyes and stimulated each other. He suppressed the netherworld ruin sword in his hand and watched as it tried to pull the sword out of its chest. It struggled violently, and he looked down at his prey expressionlessly. Countless bright, white thorns suddenly extended from the huge magic circle behind it. They wrapped around its body and spread to its entire body. This scene was quite savage. Suppress it. He did not need to say anything. The little angel had been waiting for him since a few minutes ago. She had already started suppressing his abyssal death shroud before he could pin it to the magic circle. At this moment, the abyssal death shroud on his body was slowly losing its power and calming down. "It's done. The abyssal death shroud has lost its power." As soon as she finished speaking, the death fog of the abyss that half of its body had transformed into quickly dissipated. Its body also gradually returned to the appearance of a young boy. Its pair of eyes that were filled with anger glared at Yin Nuoxing, wanting to see through the layer of fog and see who the person who had defeated it was. However, no matter how hard it tried, it could only see the ferocious appearance of the person that was mixed with two supreme powers of order. It could not even see the person's face clearly. "Die, die. Ha, look at you. Evil spirit. You're more pitiful than us. You're just a pitiful worm, tainted by this power. Sooner or later, you'll fall into the endless abyss and struggle for your life." "Ha!" Yin Nuoxing's expression trembled slightly. He lowered his eyelids slightly and shook his head. "At least, you won't be able to see that scene." The young man's face maintained a crazed smile that made people tremble in fear. Looking at Yin Nuoxing's attack that contained all his strength smashing down from the front, the crazed smile in his eyes became even more pronounced. Then he was knocked unconscious. The expression on his face was still fixed on that last scene. He probably thought that he was dead for sure this time. As the young boy fainted, Yin Nuoxing easily used the power of order to lock him up. He used the power of order to keep the young boy in a weak state. After looking at him a few times, he threw him into a chaotic space that was created by order. Yes, it was a space of order, but there was only endless chaos in it. There were no normal rules in order. He believed that even the heavenly god of the beginning would not have a good time in there, let alone this weak fledgling. First, He prayed that he would not go crazy. If he went crazy, he would have to find a way to help him return to normal. It would be too troublesome. The materialized divine, right domain also faded with the young boy's defeat. The appearance of the outer void appeared in Yun Nuoxing's sight. The golden energy and another non-order power collided in the void. Yun Nuoxing saw Hui and the tall man at a glance. Both of them looked a little embarrassed. But overall, Huey's condition was probably better. Looking at his shiny armor, there was not even a scratch. Maple, Hui, and the big guy both turned their heads abruptly. Seeing Yun Nuoxing walking out slowly, Hui laughed excitedly. On the other hand, Beihao's gloomy face became even gloomier. Yun Nuoxing's face turned even gloomier. Yun Nuoxing's face turned even gloomier. Yun Nuoxing's face turned even gloomier. Yun Nuoxing nodded at Hui. With a tacit understanding between the two of them, Hui knew what he meant. He raised the guardian's sacred sword and pointed it at Beihao. Yun Nuoxing slowly floated behind Beihao. The power of the three theocracy domains collided crazily in this void. No one was willing to relax for a moment. Why? Do you still want to fight? Hui flipped his hair in a relaxed manner. Since Maple had come out, the curtains of the battle had come to an end. Do you think I will surrender? Do you think a heavenly god of the beginning would surrender without a fight? Beihao was so angry that he laughed. He looked at the void and suddenly said, "Your lockdown time is almost up. My reinforcements can gather here in a minute. I can't beat you, but do you think I can't hold on for a while? Then why don't you?" Ugh. We was about to let him give it a try when he suddenly froze. Beihao was also stunned for a moment. A fist that was a mixture of black and white energy suddenly punched him in the face. He was instantly sent flying with a dumbfounded look on his face. A second ago, he still didn't know what had happened. A second later, he was sent flying and still didn't know what had happened. He only remembered that he seemed to have seen a punch as big as a casserole. Beihao covered his nose and stared at Yun Nuoxing. He widened his eyes in shock and fear. Why do you have such power? You're asking me? Yun Nuoxing's eyes flashed with surprise. It seemed that the underworld and the others knew about this too. As expected of the Lost Clan from the previous era, perhaps they knew more about this annihilation energy than he did. Yun Nuoxing appeared in front of Beihao in a flash. The latter was shocked. Just as he was about to defend himself, a golden energy surged out from his back, causing his movements to stiffen instantly. He was like a puppet whose strings had been pulled. Then, a huge sword with 4 different colors expanded wildly in front of his eyes. It pierced through his body with an unbelievable power. Just nice. I also wanted to ask you about this energy. Beihao's expression changed drastically. He was stunned for a moment. Then, a huge sword with 4 different colors appeared in front of him. Beihao's eyes were filled with confusion and anger. The energy that had surged into his body was wreaking havoc. The energy that had surged outside his body had turned into chains of order, binding him layer after layer. He was firmly trapped in the seal of order, and he could not break free for a while. Maple, what do we do with this guy? We floated in front of Yun Nuoxing and looked at this big guy. He threw out another pile of seals and clapped his hands. Yun Nuoxing looked at the pile of seals, and his cheeks twitched. Hang him up and take him away. He seems to know something that interests me. It's too straightforward to kill him. Of course we have to. He was suddenly stunned. Hui and Beihao were stunned too. The void suddenly trembled. It was as if the void was shaking, and the tremor seemed to be coming from that direction. The 3 of them abruptly turned to look in the same direction, only to see that the persimmon that looked like a pinch persimmon had turned into a huge sea urchin at some point in time. The thorns that had taken root in the void had spread far and wide, and one of the thorns was not far from them. The light in the center of the sea urchin suddenly became dazzling, as if something drastic was happening. The surging energy even affected this part of the void. The 3 of them looked at the sea urchin and the void in confusion. They even looked at each other, not knowing what was going on. Hey, what's going on with this thing that you guys created? Is it going to explode? We shook Beihao and couldn't help but ask. How would I know? I'm just checking. Beihao answered instinctively. Suddenly, his expression changed. Why should I answer your question? Oh no, the stability of this void is dropping rapidly. It seems like it's going to move on its own. Let's retreat first. The little girl suddenly appeared in front of the three of them and interrupted them. She reached out and grabbed Yin Nuashing and Hui. Hui also grabbed Beihao. The former mobilized all his power and was about to bring everyone away in one go. However, his expression changed. The giant black thorns had stretched out and swept them all in like a galaxy. Wow, Maple, you're late, but you're here. I knew it. Even coming out to clean won't make it easy for me. The two of them shouted at the same time. Why did everything have to go out of control in the end? Chapter 1488. The sails of a ship flapped noisily in the wind of the waves. The wet planks of a ship rose and fell with the sound of footsteps, bringing with them the sound of shoes sticking to the ground. Mixed in with these sounds was the sound of large fish swishing their tails. This was a fishing boat returning with a full load of fish from the Luoyang Black Sea, the most vigorous seafood in this part of the world's seas, one of them. Although the youth did not want to add the last two words, in reality, it was just one of them. Kid Qian, if you've rested enough, hurry up and come give me a hand. This uncle's back is really bad these 2 days. The youth opened his eyes, a vertical slit in his dark golden eyes opening and closing slightly. He took 2 seconds to react to what he had just heard. Taking his wet clothes and pants off the box and the planks of the ship, he walked toward the middle-aged man who was gritting his teeth and dragging a large fish, casually grabbing a piece of cloth that could barely be considered clean from the side. Uncle Zhao, I should have told you to rest on the side. The youth walked up to the middle-aged man, wrapping the cloth around the man's scarred right hand and patting him on the shoulder. All right, put it down. I'll take care of this big fella. We'll carry it over later. Isn't this the first time I've seen this big fella a little excited? Uncle Zhao stretched out a rough hand and patted the youth on the back, laughing out loud. His gray eyes swept over the busy people on the fishing boat and the still messy planks of the ship, and he could not help but scratch his head. The youth also looked up at the huge fishing boat that was 3,000 feet long. Looking at the busy people coming and going, he felt that it was not easy to deal with it. He could only leave their prey here for now. The youth lowered his head. It was a fish. Let's call it a fish for now. It was 10 feet long, but very flat, not even as tall as the side of the ship. It could be considered the size of a big fish, but it looked round as if it had a belly full of air. There was a 2-meter-long spear-like spike on the left and right of its huge body. On the left and right sides of its huge body, there were 6 gill-like openings arranged from top to bottom every 1 meter. However, he knew that those were not gills. If those openings were opened, they would be eyes. Anyone who saw would feel disgusted. The youth walked over to where the fish's head was and casually flipped its huge head. The fish of the Luoyang Black Sea could still live for 2 hours after they came ashore. However, they didn't dare to let this fellow jump around the ship vigorously, as that would cause the entire ship to collapse. When they brought it up, they had repeatedly confirmed that it had passed away peacefully. Only then did they feel at ease leaving it here. There were still traces of blood hanging between the rows of sharp teeth in the fish's mouth. The youth noticed a shiny object hanging by its mouth and reached out to pull it off. It was a waist tag, a slightly yellowed but well-maintained waist tag. Uncle, whose waist tag is this? The youth raised the waist tag and waved it at Uncle Zhao, who was leaning against the side of the ship. Uncle Zhao walked over and recognized the waist tag as soon as he heard the voice. He stroked his chin and said, "That's probably Yuan Kid's waist tag. Sigh. He's still very young and very clever. He should have had a bright future. Who would have thought?" Looking at Uncle Zhao's regretful expression, the youth felt that Uncle Zhao must have admired Yuan Kid, even though he did not have any impression of that person surnamed Yuan. The youth used his clothes to wipe the waist tag, but even after a while, it was still wet. There was probably no clean and dry place on the ship, so there was no way to properly deal with it. He threw the waist tag to Uncle Zhao and said, "Return it to his family. Arrange for his family's funeral. Yuan Kid doesn't have a family." Uncle Zhao smiled helplessly. He was a survivor of a broken coast around the sea of the world. He wandered to our place, and I took him on the ship because I saw him. I'll keep this waist tag for now. If one day we can go to the coast he mentioned once, I'll bury it there. The youth was speechless. He opened his mouth a few times to say something, but in the end, he just sighed. There were too many of such things. He tilted his head and saw Uncle Zhao wiping the waist tag lovingly. Unable to say anything, he sighed again and walked to the side. Before he could take a few steps, he saw a group of people on the opposite side of the ship, and it was a little noisy. He could not help but frown and walked over. Before he could decide whether to scold or shout, he heard some panicked voices and quickly ran over. "What are you all doing here? What happened?" When the crew heard the voice, they hurriedly moved aside to make a path. Only 3 people were still leaning half of their bodies out of the ship's railing. They looked like they were using all their strength to pull something out. "Captain, our jade spirit net has hooked onto something. It's very heavy and shockingly heavy. If it's not a school of fish, then it's a big guy. If we get it, it might be worth half a year's work," a crew member said nervously in the youth's ear. Hearing that, the youth could not help but frown. He looked down at the situation below the ship and saw that the 3 crew members were using all their strength to grab onto a large jade white net. It had hooked onto something under the sea and was sinking with all its strength. This was the process of the jade spirit net mobilizing its power. When it wrapped the prey as tightly as it could, the prey would not be able to escape. That was how they had caught the big guy just now. "Are you sure it's not some garbage that floated out to the sea?" The youth could not help but ask. If it's garbage, how could it be so heavy? Also, I haven't seen the jade spirit net mobilizing its power many times. Every time it does, it means that it has caught a rare prey. The youth thought about it and agreed. He looked down for a while and shook his head. At this speed, if something was really caught in the net, by the time they pulled it up, the ship would have drifted far away. "Move aside, let me do it." The youth patted the shoulders of the crew members and reached out to take the jade spirit net. As soon as he used his strength, his expression changed. He screamed and half of his body fell out. The crew members behind him were so scared that they quickly hugged his waist. "Captain, be careful. That thing is very heavy." The youth clenched his teeth. His dark golden eyes were wide open, and his handsome face was red. The commotion attracted the attention of the other people on the ship. A group of people hurriedly threw down their belongings and ran over. With a few shouts, almost half of the people on the ship gathered. The group of people at the back hugged the waist of the front and pulled with all their strength. The ship sank a little. Uncle Zhao felt that the ship was slightly tilted. His cheeks twitched. "Hurry up and open the stabilizing stones on both sides. Don't let them sink the ship." The group of people held their breath until their faces were red. Uncle Zhao clearly saw that someone was using so much strength that snot was flying out his nose. He could not help but roll his eyes. Just as he was about to go over and help, the group of people suddenly fell back like ribs. The scene suddenly became very chaotic. "What's going on?" Uncle Zhao hurriedly ran over and saw the youth sitting down with one end of the jade spirit net in his hand. When the youth saw him running over, he quickly waved his hand. "Uncle, I don't know what the jade spirit net caught. I just fished it up. Take a look. I don't have any strength left." Uncle Zhao's cheeks twitched. He walked over and took the jade spirit net from the youth's hand. He gently pulled it up. However, the jade spirit net was no longer a net. He could not even see the holes in the net. It was now a dense curtain of light that wrapped itself into a huge package. That was the state of the jade spirit net when it was compressed to its limit. "Damn, what did you catch? Look at the way the jade spirit net is being compressed. Did you catch the overlord of the Luo Yang Black Sea?" The group of people lying on the ship laughed loudly and helped each other to stand up. The youth also helplessly laughed bitterly. He stood up and looked at the jade spirit package that Uncle Zhao had placed on the deck. He watched as the youth carefully unwrapped the jade spirit net. The package immediately loosened, and the thing inside appeared in front of everyone's eyes. More than 100 people hurriedly looked inside and were all stunned. It was a humanoid creature wearing strange clothes that flickered with light. It had the same thing as their hair, but it was very beautiful. It was a silver-white color that almost no one had ever seen before. More importantly, it looked very beautiful. Uncle Zhao, is this the overlord of the Luo Yang Black Sea that you mentioned? Seeing the thing in front of him, the youth was stunned. Uncle Zhao was also stunned for a while before he came back to his senses. No, that is a real sea creature, not this. Hey, this is obviously a refugee. Hurry up and save her. What are you waiting for? The group of people trembled when they were yelled at. Some people hurriedly ran out to find things to save her. The youth squatted in front of her and reached out to pat her face. After sensing for a while, he suddenly sighed. Don't bother, Uncle. She has probably floated in the sea for a long time. She is no longer breathing. She is not even breathing. Uncle Zhao was stunned when he heard this. He couldn't help but sigh. Sigh, what a good little girl. She's gone just like that. The youth was helpless. When the surrounding crew members heard this, they also sighed. They were used to such things. One of the crew members walked forward and handed over a clean white cloth. The youth could tell that it was a bedsheet. It was just that he didn't know who had gotten the clean bedsheet from when he was busy. He nodded and took it, covering her body with it. The youth lowered his head and muttered a few words. Then he waved his hand. All right, let's go. Hurry up and pack up the goods on the ship. We have to get back to the coast before dusk. Everyone lowered their heads and muttered a few words. Just as they were about to go back to work, they suddenly saw the girl with frighteningly bright hair suddenly jump up. She opened her eyes with a blank expression. Everyone, the youth and Uncle Zhao. She came back to life. Water ghost. Water ghost. The ship, which had been quiet just a moment ago, was now in an uproar. A group of people were wailing like ghosts and howling like wolves as they bumped into each other. Strange words came out of their mouths as they called out their 7 aunts and 8 aunts. Some people even recited a strange incantation. It was unknown if it was used to suppress ghosts. The chaotic scene was as if they had seen a living ghost. Oh, they had seen a ghost. Yin Nuoxing felt that she might have woken up at the wrong time. Judging from the current situation, the sea breeze, the ship, the seafood, a group of people who were stunned as if they had seen a ghost. His hair was disheveled and his body was wet. He had probably just been fished out of the sea by someone, but this couldn't be blamed on him. When he felt that he had just regained consciousness, he must have subconsciously opened his eyes. 1 second, he was still fighting with the big guy. The next second, he was kidnapped by the sea urchin. If he didn't open his eyes when he woke up, what if the sea urchin wanted to hit him with a stick and take advantage of him while he was unconscious? So where was he now? Seeing that the entire ship's crew was in a mess and completely unable to calm down, Yin Nuoxing tidied his hair and turned his head to look at the 2 people who were completely dumbfounded from the beginning to the end. They were dumbfounded, and completely motionless. Excuse me, where is this place? Just now, she heard those people calling out their 7 aunts and 8 aunts in the common language of all races. That meant that this place should also be connected. Otherwise, she could only talk to them telepathically. The youth was glanced at by the silver-white eyes and came back to her senses. She was stunned for a while before she subconsciously said, "This is the Luo Yang Black Sea. There is no specific boundary. We should be near the boundary of the Liruo Black Sea and closer to the center of the Luo Yang Black Sea." Okay, the moment she opened her mouth, a bunch of strange words smashed into her brain. Yin Nuoxing only felt a slight headache. Obviously, she couldn't tell which world they were in. Since they had been kidnapped by the sea urchin, they should be in this sea urchin world, right? But a world formed inside a distorted creation of laws. This sounded a little ridiculous. This thing couldn't even stabilize its own laws. How could it form a world? After thinking for a while, Yin Nuoxing suddenly felt a little dizzy and a headache. She checked her own condition. It didn't seem to be caused by an attack. It was just a side effect of colliding with the laws of this world. She might be dizzy for a while. Then, she checked on the others. The little angel was still here, and she was still unconscious from the collision with the laws of this world. She had fused very deeply with him, and her appearance had changed a little. As for Hui, she couldn't contact him, but that thick-skinned guy should be fine. And that big guy, he had disappeared. If he recovered, there would be trouble again. Yin Nuoxing lifted the white cloth hanging on her body and stood up abruptly. As soon as she stood up, she swayed a few times because of the dizziness. She hurriedly pressed down on a row of boxes beside her to steady herself. Uncle Zhao looked at the situation in front of him and pondered for a moment. Then he said to the young man, "Kid Qian, you look after her. I'll go and take care of those useless brats. They're already so old, yet they're still scared." The young man's face twitched. The situation just now had scared even them. A person who was confirmed to be dead suddenly jumped up after a while. This scene was too horrifying. Seeing Uncle Zhao leave to find trouble with the whaling crew, the young man sighed and looked at Yin Nuoxing, who was shaking her head vigorously. He said, "You should sit down and rest first. You've been floating in the sea for who knows how long. You've just woken up. It's better not to move around casually." "Oh, I'm fine. I'm just a little dizzy." Yin Nuoxing responded with a smile and shook her head. She was about to deal with the situation of her brain not working well when she suddenly stared at the young man. The young man was stunned. "By the way, you just said that this is the Luoyang Black Sea. Where is it?" The young man's eyes suddenly widened. "It's the most famous and vast sea area around the world sea, one of them. You don't know this?" Yin Nuoxing smiled bitterly. She stretched out her hand and moved it around her head. Then she smiled apologetically. "My mind is a mess. It's very blurry. I can't think of anything clearly." "Oh, that's what it means." The young man was stunned. Then he suddenly understood. "Oh, people who drown may lose their memories. I understand. It seems that you need some time to adjust your memory. Do you still remember anything? Tell me a little. Maybe I can tell you in order." Yin Nuoxing tried hard to recall some of the things she might have seen before she fainted. Broken City? Great Hall? And oh, he had just said a few words when his head hurt again. The rules he carried with him conflicted with the rules of this world. He might not be able to adjust in a short time. Even thinking a little was a little troublesome. This was the first time he had encountered such a situation. He was injured because he collided with another object of rules. It seemed that this world was a little unusual. He did not know if there was anything special about taking the risk to come here and having a fierce fight with the two primeval gods. Broken City and Great Hall. The young man frowned. He quickly organized the information in his mind and the situation over the years. You might be a survivor who floated out from the broken coast around the world sea. Survivor? Yin Nuoxing was stunned. Broken coast. That means, could it be? The young man frowned again. He sighed helplessly, and his face showed a worried look. That's the case. The threat from the world sea would sometimes lead to the destruction of an entire coast. Such things have happened many times. You might be a survivor who experienced one of those destruction. In that case, amnesia might be normal. You might have seen something before, been frightened, fell into the water, and fainted. It might take a lot of time to find out where you came from. We can only do that when we get ashore. Yin Nuoxing pretended to be a loss, but he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. I've come to another world I don't know. The world-rimmed sea. The broken coast. He didn't even have to say anything, and this young man helped him to cover up his origin. The young man probably thought that he was a person who was destroyed by some force on the coast and accidentally fell into the water when he was escaping, and then experienced all kinds of things and finally floated here. That's right. It was a reasonable idea. People who were fished up from the sea would more or less have such origins. In any case, he had been to quite a few worlds and was already used to barging into any world with any identity. Even if this world was suddenly lit with fireworks in the next second, he would still be able to remain calm. Now, he needed to understand this world a little more. Yin Nuoxing's eyes rolled a few times. It seemed that he could not run away immediately. He had to get some useful information from the young man before him. Chapter 1489. The sea urchin world was incompatible with the void outside. The void it was in was occupied by chaotic order, with no order and leaning towards the side of chaos. It was a distorted creation that could only be formed in the void by distorting the rules, but it had formed a world inside. Although the rules it contained were different from those of all the worlds Yin Nuashing had seen, and every inch of space was filled with dissonance, but it existed here. When the capacity and content of the rules increased to a certain level, it was easy to evolve into a world. This was a process of continuous accumulation and increment. Without any actual change, it was difficult to observe the changes in the void. One could only use some means to investigate. For example, if a void region suddenly accelerated the gathering of the power and energy of the rules, it might be because the region had accumulated enough quantity. In the next second, a violent explosion sounded, and a new source world was born in the void. Similar situations could also be controlled by humans. For example, at their realm, just the rebirth realm, creating a world wasn't anything special to them. They could use their own methods to create a region, condense the blank rules they needed, or weave it themselves, and then guide the birth of a world. After saying so much, Yin Nuashing just wanted to say that the birth of a world in the void was a general trend. At least the void was still very active at the moment, and it still wanted to create a world to prove that it was not cold. Under the influence of this void trend, some regions that had the same conditions but were not particularly stable inside could also give birth to a world as long as the conditions were in place. However, Yin Nuashing felt that he could exclude those strange creations of distorted rules created by the underworld. Since the sea urchin world he was in had evolved into a world, it meant that this sea urchin world had enough conditions. This led him to another direction in his speculation about the use of these creations of the twisted rules, but he was not completely sure yet. There were too many secrets hidden in the underworld, which involved the matters of the previous era and this void. The annihilated history and time stopped them, but not the underworld. They could only watch whatever strange things the underworld was up to. They did not want to risk being besieged by a group of heavenly gods of the beginning to come here to see the truth. Yin Nuashing raised his head to look beyond the sky and took a deep breath. He could not see the starlight. There was a layer of fog shrouding a very, very distant place. It was very far away from the sky. He felt that he might have seen too far all of a sudden, so he pulled his gaze back a little. Then he saw a piece of the starry sky, a sun. It was gone. At this moment, the sunlight that shone on this world was the only two celestial bodies in this star field. As for the other one, it was the continent under their feet. This continent was not a planet, nor was it a flat piece of land. At present, he could only see water, 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 and water. It was water. No wonder it was called the Sea of the World. This world was all water as far as the eye could see. Yin Nuashing could not finish looking at the situation in one breath. The young man with the surname, Qian, was sorting out the so-called lost memories for him. The young man told him that this world had existed for a very long time and had a very long history. As for the upper limit of that time, this world did not have a specific answer. However, the number was mostly fixed at 100 million years. There might be small fluctuations in the number, but it would not deviate from this unit. 100 million years. The people living in this world, which was limited by time and space, probably had no way to understand the so-called 100 million year span. According to the young man, they relied on many records to piece together the history and time bit by bit. Because there were disasters in this world from time to time, the traces of life would disappear from time to time, and many records left behind would be destroyed. This was also the reason why there was no way to confirm the upper limit of history and only a certain range. For Yin Nuashing and the others, 100 million years. This 100 million years was a tense period of war, and the time coincided with the time when they first started fighting with the underworld. This number was probably a coincidence. Or perhaps something special happened during that time, which just happened to lead to the formation of this sea urchin world. What was so noteworthy about 100 million years ago? Yin Nuashing sighed. At this moment, his head was still hurting, and there were too many things that he could not think of clearly. In any case, he did not believe that this world was really formed under the trend of the void. It was definitely guided by someone, and in the end, it evolved into this state, probably. The deep blue sea was calm and tranquil. Gazing into the distance, one could vaguely feel that the sea had turned black. This was probably the origin of the Black Sea's name. The work on the huge fishing ship had finally ended. The sailors who had just returned from fishing took control of the ship in batches, while the rest of the crew seized the precious time to rest. Everyone's faces were filled with excitement after a bountiful harvest. However, if one were to look closely, one would discover that their expressions were mixed with some nervousness and were slightly taut. Yin Nuashing could tell what they were wary of. He made a quick assessment of the current situation and did not need to use much of his brain to guess why they were nervous. The Luo Yang Black Sea. At this moment, they were at the edge of the center of this sea region and were leaving this place at full speed. Some of the life forms in the sea posed a great threat to them. Until they returned, no one dared to truly relax. The peace and tranquility at this moment was only temporary. If they were not careful, they might capsize and fall into the deep sea together with the boat. Yin Nuashing did not understand the situation of this world very well. As a warrior, his intuition told him that everyone was nervous and slightly fearful. He looked around and suddenly looked at the youth and said, "The Luo Yang Black Sea? I remember that it is not safe. Although it is one of the widest sea regions, it is equally dangerous. Why did you come here?" "We have no choice. In order to survive." This is the most common way of saying it. The sea around the world is very dangerous for most of us. As the youth spoke, he suddenly pulled open his light clothes, revealing his waist. There were several huge wounds there, both dark and light. It seemed that he had been injured many times. "I have 3 similar wounds on my body, but we have to survive. Under the limited control of the coastal waters, there is no way to meet the needs of the entire coast and the inland. Especially as the number of people in the broken coast increases. Life is getting harder and harder." As the youth spoke, he could not help but sigh. To put it bluntly, it was for the sake of all his compatriots. A considerable part of their harvest this time had to be handed over. But this reason was too bullsh*t, so he could only come up with another reason. They had to survive too. Under the situation where the coastal waters were divided and controlled, and income could not make ends meet, it was not enough to just take over the coastal waters. There were actually many more people like them who ventured deep into the ocean, and he was just one of the tens of millions of small teams. Yin Nuashing tilted his head. He knew very little about this world. He only knew that the human life in this world seemed to regard the sea as the only source of food. But at the same time, the sea also brought about a huge threat to them. And perhaps not only that, when a youth mentioned the inland, he clearly saw the youth frown slightly. Perhaps there was something wrong with the inland as well. Who knows? The youth looked around and suddenly saw Yin Nuashing. He suddenly remembered how the jade spirit net had been completely withdrawn when he had just picked her up. His heart relaxed a little for no reason, but then he became nervous again. It seemed that the moment of relaxation was just an illusion. Do you know where someone who got separated from me would drift to if they were in the same place as me? Yin Nuashing's sudden voice caught the youth's attention. He could not help but be stunned when he heard it. After thinking for a while, he shook his head and said, "It's hard to say. First of all, we don't know, and you don't remember where you were before. The current in the Luo Yang Black Sea is unpredictable. It's like a huge whirlpool that constantly attracts everything around the world sea. However, those things are like passers-by, hurriedly passing by and leaving in a hurry. The same goes for the seawater and the fish in the sea. You drifted here and were found by us. Maybe you were just lucky. As for the others you mentioned," the youth frowned slightly. "If you mean your friends, I'm sorry, we can't help you." Yin Nuashing's cheeks twitched. She felt that it was strange and hurriedly waved her hand. "That guy won't die. Even if he soaks in the water for a year and a half, he will still be healthy. I just want to know where he might have drifted to. Maybe I can follow the direction to find him." After all, they could not use soul communication now. They did not know how this world had blocked part of their senses. There were many things that they could not sense clearly. They had even lost most of their connection with the void. Fortunately, these were the only restrictions. There was no more exaggerated or severe suppression. If there was, according to the aftereffects left behind by the conflict of laws, if there was suppression, he should still be lying on the ground, fighting against the strange laws of the sea urchin world. However, these restrictions made him feel uneasy. He did not know how long it would take to find Hui like this. There was also that big guy. He and Hui had left a bunch of seals on the big guy's body. Logically speaking, he should not be able to break free. However, this was a world that they had created by distorting the laws of nature. Simply put, this was their territory. Who knew if they had any special methods? Seeing Yin Nuoxing's worried expression, the youth could not help but comfort her. Don't worry. According to what you said, your friend should be fine. He might have drifted along with the current to the sea area adjacent to the Luo Yang Black Sea. At most, he should have drifted 2 sea areas away. He shouldn't have gone any further. To be able to make the Jade Spirit Internet react that way, and make Uncle Zhao think of the Luo Yang Black Sea as the overlord of the Luo Yang Black Sea, this kind of weirdo, even if he drifted in the sea for a long time, he would probably be fine. Yin Nuoxing felt strange when she heard this. However, in this situation, it was fine as long as it did not cause any conflicts. As for what they thought of him, it was none of his business. Along the way, the sea gradually turned blue. The fishing boat gradually left the territory of the Luo Yang Black Sea. When the sea completely turned black, Yin Nuoxing could clearly see the people on the boat heaving a sigh of relief. Some even cheered softly and made cheerful gestures. It felt as if they had just pulled their feet back from the gates of hell. We've already entered the territory of the distant sea. We can't relax completely. Let the Power Stone switch to its normal energy output mode. Based on our current speed, we should be able to reach the coast before dusk. The uncle's loud shout came from behind the boat. Yin Nuoxing turned around to look, then lowered his head subconsciously. His gaze penetrated the thick deck and saw the structure of the boat. He found the source of the boat's energy output, a blue stone about 10 meters tall. Looking at the light shining from it, it seemed to contain a lot of energy. Of course, this was relative to this world. The amount of energy produced by his breathing per second was more than the amount of energy produced by 10,000 of these stones stacked together. This energy basically circulated in his body and then returned to the void. It was just an energy cycle. Speaking of stones, he seemed to have seen stones that contained energy all over the boat. Some were installed at the joints of the boat's structure, while others were on the sides of the boat. The energy waves they emitted were different, and they seemed to have various effects. What do you plan to do next? Before Yin Nuoxing could recover from his peeping, the young man's voice suddenly rang in his ears, causing him to be stunned. He raised his head to look at the young man, and his eyes rolled a few times. Let me think. I'm still in a daze now, and I don't know where I came from or where I'm going. So, after I reach the shore, I'll probably gather some information. If there are no accidents, I'll probably keep walking along the coast. If I can reach a broken coast, I might be able to remember something. While I'm at it, I'll also look for my unlucky partner. I'll look for my partner. The last sentence was actually unnecessary. With Huey's rough appearance, there was absolutely nothing in this world that could hurt him. They were all energy life forms. They would not starve to death, even if they were thrown into the wilderness or the sea. If they found him later, they would at most have to accept his nagging about being abandoned for tens of thousands of years, even if only a few days had passed. Just as the teenager was about to speak, Uncle Zhao suddenly came over mysteriously. He did not care that Yin Nuoxing was beside him and directly said, "Qian boy, there are some cracks on our energy stone. Maybe it was affected by the sea storm in the Luo Yang Black Sea." The teenager's expression changed. He lowered his voice and asked, "How long can it last? If we conserve our energy, we should be able to get close to the coastal area by evening. There's nothing we can do after that." Uncle Zhao sighed in a deep voice. The teenager frowned slightly. As he stood up, he saw Yin Nuoxing also stood up abruptly. Then, She swayed a few times dizzily and quickly said, "You should rest first." Yin Nuashing heard this, shook his head, and forced himself to stand up straight. He smiled slightly and said, "I'm fine. I'm just a little dizzy. The boat is the most important thing now." "Yes, you're right." The teenager smiled bitterly. His words had touched on the source of his headache again. "Let's go and have a look." Yin Nuashing waved his hand and took a few steps forward. "Just standing here won't solve anything. Can you solve the problem of the energy stone?" Uncle Zhao and the teenager were both stunned. Yin Nuashing tilted his head and pondered for a while. Then he smiled and said, "I'm quite knowledgeable about energy." He did not say that he was knowledgeable about the strange stones. After all, the laws of every world were different. He had just come into contact with the things of this world and wanted to use some kind of law power. It was not safe to tamper with the laws of this world. It could easily cause two different kinds of laws to reject each other, and then boom. However, he himself was an energy source. Energy was universal in most worlds. At worst, he could use the power of the void to power the ship, although it was a little overkill. If the energy stone could not be fixed, he could stand on it and replace the energy. It would not be a problem for him to make the ship fly. Yin Nuashing's smile was very contagious. The two who had been frowning suddenly relaxed a lot. After looking at each other, they quickly walked in front to lead the way. After passing through the cabin, they came to the Power Stone Room on the lower level. Just like Dao Tian's strange spaceship, this was the place where the power core of the entire spaceship was loaded. Although the scale and structure of the two spaceships were completely different, the style of this core place was very similar. Dao Tian's spaceship had many pipes connected to the power core. Here a stone was knocked into a huge jar. The jar seemed to be a huge container for collecting and releasing energy. Every time he saw these strange things, Yin Nuashing felt like the style of the world was transmigrated. He suddenly thought of Navila, that weird guy, and wondered if they were doing well in the 139th era. Speaking of which, why did Dao Tian take so long to advance to the origin realm? It had been almost 3 million years. Was that girl sleeping like a log? Yin Nuashing suddenly retracted his thoughts and focused his gaze on the thing called the Power Stone that was knocked into the jar. It was a big stone that was smooth, but not flat, and grew irregularly. It was really a stone. The texture of the stone and the touch of the stone had inexplicably become a huge energy carrier. The energy inside was really chaotic and rough to him, and was a little stinky. That was because the energy was too mottled and mixed. However, the level of development of this world had not reached a particularly high level. There shouldn't be any rebirth state beings in this world. The beginner god realm might be the highest level they could reach. However, such an ordinary-looking stone was probably the energy source that they commonly used. From the looks of it, there was a crack on the surface of the stone that stretched from the top to the bottom. The crack should have come from the inside, and the relatively pure energy inside was leaking out, filling up the jar and overflowing out. It was leaking and slowly dissipating in this space. Yin Nuashing touched the stone and shook his hand. The energy in the jar was in the form of a liquid, so it was a little sticky. He put it under his nose and took a breath. He rolled his eyes and almost fainted. He turned around and looked at the young man and the old man. Before he spoke, he was stunned. "What's with your expressions?" The young man and Uncle Zhao were dumbfounded as they watched him reach out and touch the thick layer of energy that needed to be dealt with by special means. They almost fainted. The young man came back to his senses and quickly pinched Uncle Zhao. He coughed and said, "Ahem, nothing. How is it? Can it be fixed?" Yin Nuashing nodded and put his hand into the jar again. A silver-white light flashed along the crack of the power stone. "It's done. It's just an energy leak. It's not a big problem." After the silver light flashed, the surging energy in the jar slowly calmed down. The energy reaction also gradually calmed down and no longer leaked into the air due to overflowing energy. It was just a little energy suppression method. Uncle Zhao quickly went forward to check. He fiddled with the jar for a while. The look on his face became even more horrified. "It's really fixed." Uncle Zhao looked at him. His expression suddenly changed. He went forward and lowered his voice like a human trafficker. "Miss, are you selling the technology in your hand?" Yin Nuoshing was stunned. Question mark. The young man slapped his face and quickly pushed Uncle Zhao away. He laughed dryly at Yin Nuoshing. "Don't mind the uncle. He used to work in a broken supply station. He's a little nervous." "Ahem, judging from your look, you probably don't know or have forgotten. There's no way to fix a damaged power stone. So, seeing you fix the power stone so quickly, the uncle is a little crazy." Yin Nuoshing scratched his head and laughed dryly. He did not explain anything. Uncle Zhao returned to normal after being nagged by the young man. He fiddled with the jar for a while. Then, he was even more horrified. Their ship seemed to be overloaded. It might explode. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.